Rachel Chen stared at the contract spread across her desk like a final exam she was destined to fail. Thornton Development Group was offering $85,000 for an environmental assessment. Her struggling consulting firm needed that money the way a drowning man needs air. The catch sat there in black and white, buried in the scope of work section. The project required her professional certification that Hayes Dam posed an environmental hazard to the surrounding watershed. Hayes Dam, the century-old structure her ex-husband had just inherited from the father he barely knew. The father who died 3 weeks ago in early April while Marcus was in Denver closing a contract that probably didn't matter to anyone. 3 years since the divorce papers were signed. 3 years of awkward handoffs with their daughter Emma at coffee shops and parking lots. 3 years of avoiding Pinewood Valley, and all the memories that small Colorado town held. Now here was the universe, offering her a choice disguised as a business opportunity. Tell the truth and lose everything she'd built, or compromise just enough to survive. Her phone vibrated across the mahogany desk. Emma's name lit up the screen. "Mom, did you hear? Grandpa Tom died." Rachel's chest tightened. She'd already heard through the small-town network that connected everyone who'd ever lived in Pinewood Valley. Tom Hayes had collapsed while repairing the dam spillway on April 6th. Died before the ambulance could navigate the mountain roads. Alone, except for the stone and water he'd spent 60 years protecting. "I heard, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." "The funeral's Saturday." Emma's voice carried that particular quality of someone trying not to cry in a dorm room, while her roommate pretended not to listen. "April 18th. Will you come?" "Of course." Rachel's mind was already calculating. 2 weeks since Tom's death. Marcus would have spent those weeks avoiding the reality, burying himself in work, pretending grief could be managed like a project with clear deliverables and completion dates. "I don't know if I can face Dad right now," Emma continued. Rachel closed her eyes. Through her office window, Denver stretched out in afternoon sunlight, all glass towers and carefully planned streets. Pinewood Valley sat 2 hours southwest, tucked into mountains where water still remembered its old paths, and stone structures built by hand still did the work they were designed for. "We'll get through this together," Rachel said. After Emma hung up, Rachel sat in the silence of her corner office. The Thornton contract waited. $85,000. 6 months of payroll. The difference between keeping her firm alive and shutting down. All she had to do was certify that a dam she'd never examined posed dangers she had no evidence existed. Her late father's voice echoed from childhood. He'd been a civil engineer in Taiwan before immigrating to America. Precision and integrity, Xiaolei. These are the foundations. Without them, everything you build will eventually collapse. Rachel picked up her phone and dialed her business partner. "Jessica, I need to tell you something about the Thornton contract." 18 years earlier, Rachel had stood in Riverside Community Church for her wedding. Tom Hayes had pulled her aside during the reception, his weathered hands gentle on her shoulders, his eyes carrying that particular wisdom of men who'd spent decades watching water flow. "My son loves his work more than he should," Tom had said, the scent of pine from the surrounding mountains mixed with champagne and cake. But beneath all that ambition, he's got his grandfather's heart. Sometimes it just takes a crisis to find it. Be patient with him, Rachel. She'd been patient. 15 years of patience. Patient through missed anniversaries, patient through Emma's dance recitals, where Marcus showed up for the final bow after working through the performance. Patient through dinners eaten alone, while Marcus finished just one more engineering report. Patient until patience transformed into something harder and colder, something that looked like wisdom but felt like resignation. Now she sat in the same church pew on a cold April Saturday, Emma pressed against her left side, watching her ex-husband arrive 20 minutes late to his own father's funeral. Marcus slipped into the back row, his suit wrinkled like he'd pulled it from the bottom of a gym bag. His hair needed cutting, his eyes carried shadows that spoke of sleepless nights and regrets that arrived too late to change anything. Spring in the Colorado mountains was unpredictable. Yesterday had brought snow. Today offered weak sunlight through clouds that threatened more. The kind of weather that matched funerals perfectly. Emma's fingers dug into Rachel's arm. "Mom, I can't believe him. 20 minutes late to his own father's funeral." Rachel said nothing. There was nothing to say that would bridge the canyon between a daughter's anger and a father's failures. The church held 273 people. Rachel had counted during the opening hymn, a nervous habit from childhood. Tom Hayes had touched more lives than his son realized. Ranchers and business people, teachers and retirees, the mayor, and the grocery store clerk. They'd all come to honor a man who'd spent 60 years maintaining a dam most of them never thought about. Reverend Patricia Chen, no relation to Rachel despite sharing a surname, spoke with the authority of someone who'd known Tom since childhood. Tom Hayes was a keeper. The word settled over the congregation like dust after a long journey. He kept promises when keeping them cost him something. He kept watch over this valley's water, understanding that what flowed downstream mattered as much as what stayed behind. He kept faith that good work endures, even when nobody's watching. He kept everything except his son close. Rachel watched Marcus flinch in the back row. Good. Let him feel it. Let him understand what his absence cost. After the service, the church basement filled with casseroles and quiet conversations. Rachel found herself cornered near the coffee urn by a trio of older women who'd known Tom for decades. Janet Reeves, 67 and sharp as October frost, pressed Rachel's hand between both of hers. "Oh, Rachel, dear, I'm so sorry about Tom. Such a tragedy, dying alone like that." Helen Wu, 73 and recently widowed, added sugar to her coffee with trembling hands. "Working on that dam by himself at 68. Heart attack right there on the spillway," they said. If only Marcus had been here to help. But I suppose some men value their careers more than family. Diane Thornton, 54 and newly divorced, spoke quietly. Her eyes held knowledge earned through pain. Some men only learn the value of family after they've already lost it. By then, it's usually too late. Rachel understood she was witnessing something deeper than gossip. This was a reckoning. The women of Pinewood Valley had been keeping score of Marcus's absences for years. Every missed visit, every phone call not returned, every promise to help his father that dissolved into excuses about important projects and crucial deadlines. They'd been watching and judging, and now, with Tom cold in the ground, they were delivering their verdict. The attorney's office smelled like old paper and furniture polish. Victor Reyes had practiced law in Pinewood for 53 years. His desk was mahogany, his chair leather, his patience infinite. He'd known Marcus since childhood and Emma since birth. Now he watched them sit across from each other like strangers forced to share a waiting room. Emma chose the chair closest to the window. Marcus took the one nearest the door, as if already planning his escape back to Denver. Victor opened a folder with the careful precision of a surgeon beginning an operation. "Tom's will is straightforward. Emma, you inherit his 1978 Ford pickup, his tools, his fishing equipment, and his personal journals." Emma's eyes widened. "The journals?" "All 40 volumes. Your grandfather documented everything. Daily entries going back to 1984. Victor turned to Marcus. "You inherit the land. 15 acres, including the cottage and workshop. You also inherit Hayes Dam and all associated water rights and responsibilities dating back to 1922. Marcus nodded slowly, processing. "What responsibilities exactly?" "Annual maintenance reports to the county water district, seasonal inspections, compliance with the original flood control compact. Your father was meticulous about documentation. You'll find everything you need in his files." Emma's voice cut through the room like river ice cracking. "Of course you get the land. You get everything and abandon it, just like you did with Mom. Just like you did with Grandpa." Rachel watched her daughter's anger pour out. 18 years of disappointment crystallizing into accusation. Marcus started, his voice tired in a way that went deeper than sleepless nights. "That's not fair." "Fair?" Emma leaned forward, her hands gripping the chair arms. "Grandpa called you 47 times last year." I counted in his journal. "You returned 12 calls. 12. He needed help with dam maintenance. He asked you 3 times to visit just for a weekend. You were always too busy. He died alone, Dad. Heart attack on the spillway while repairing your inheritance." "Where were you?" "In Denver," Marcus said quietly, closing the Westridge contract. "A contract that probably doesn't matter to anyone." Emma's voice broke. "Grandpa mattered. He needed you. And you chose work." The silence that followed had weight and texture. Victor cleared his throat. "Emma, there's something you should know. Your grandfather's last journal entry was dated the day before he died. April 5th. May I read it? Emma nodded, tears threatening to break through her anger. Victor pulled reading glasses from his pocket and opened a leather-bound journal. Emma called today, asked if I was mad at Marcus for not visiting, told her no. Can't be angry at a man for being afraid. Marcus is afraid of becoming like me, stuck in a small town, working with his hands, choosing legacy over ambition. But what he doesn't understand is I chose this life, and it was enough, more than enough. I hope someday he learns that before it's too late. I love my son even if I don't know how to tell him anymore. Emma's tears came then, silent and steady. Grandpa wasn't mad at you? Marcus sat frozen, his face pale. He thought I was afraid. Victor extended an envelope to Marcus. Your father wanted you to read this alone. Take your time. Marcus drove back to his Denver apartment in a fog. The envelope sat on the passenger seat like a passenger he didn't know how to talk to. Traffic flowed around him. The city rose from the plains ahead, all ambition and forward momentum. He'd built a life here, a career as a hydraulic engineer, a reputation for precision and reliability, an empty apartment that echoed when he walked through it. He waited until after midnight to open the letter, poured 2 fingers of whiskey he didn't drink, sat at his kitchen table with its view of downtown Denver. All those lit windows where other people were living lives that probably made more sense than his. The handwriting was his father's, careful and measured. Dear Marcus, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't find the words to say this while I had time. You think I resented you for leaving Pinewood. I didn't. I was proud. You became an engineer, made a life in the city, married a good woman. That took courage I never had. But son, somewhere along the way you started measuring success by how far you got from here. And you lost something precious. The knowledge that some things matter more than career advancement. The dam isn't just stone and water. It's a promise I made to protect our valley. My father made that promise in 1922. I kept it for 60 years. Now it's your turn. Not because you owe me anything, because those 200 families downstream don't know their homes are safe because of what we built. That's the burden of stewardship, protecting people who don't even know you're there. Garrett Thornton has been pressuring me to sell for 5 years, offered $650,000. I said no because our land isn't about money. It's about responsibility. He'll come after you next. He wants to destroy the dam for his development project. Don't let him, not for me, for the valley. I forgive you for not being here. I hope you can forgive yourself. Love, Dad. A postscript followed in slightly shakier handwriting. Be a better father to Emma than I was to you. She needs you, even if she doesn't say it. Marcus broke then, the kind of breaking that happens when a man who's held everything together through force of will finally runs out of strength. He cried at his kitchen table with his father's letter clutched in hands that had forgotten how to build anything that mattered. The certified letter arrived 2 days later. Thick envelope, legal weight paper, the kind of documentation designed to intimidate. Thornton Ridge Homeowners Association. Notice of immediate compliance and assessment demand. Marcus read it twice, his engineering mind trying to find the logic flaw. According to the letter, Hayes Property had joined the Thornton Ridge HOA in 2008. Marcus's father had never mentioned this. The letter claimed $18,000 in back fees for community water management services. Services his family had apparently never requested, never received, never agreed to pay for. The dam itself was classified as an unauthorized pre-1950 structure in violation of community standards and modern safety regulations. He had 45 days to pay the fees and remove the dam, or face $1,000 per day in fines. Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed the number printed on the letterhead. Thornton Development Group. How may I direct your call? Garrett Thornton, please. Hold for Mr. Thornton. 60 seconds of smooth jazz later, a voice came on the line. Confident, measured, the sound of a man used to getting his way. Garrett Thornton speaking. Mr. Thornton, this is Marcus Hayes. I received a letter about HOA fees and dam removal. Ah, Marcus, my condolences on your father. Tom was stubborn, but I respected him. I hope you'll be more reasonable. My family never joined your HOA. A pause, just long enough to feel calculated. Marcus, let's be practical here. I'm offering $700,000 for your property. That's extremely generous given the liabilities involved. Your father spent 60 years maintaining an aging dam. Is that how you want to spend your life? Or do you want to move forward? The tone shifted then, subtle as a pressure change before a storm. I tried to work with Tom for years. He made this difficult, made it personal. Don't make the same mistakes he did. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Is that a threat? It's advice. That dam is coming down. The only question is whether you profit from it or fight it like your father did. Garrett paused for effect. We know how that ended. The line went dead. Marcus sat staring at his phone. Through his apartment window, Denver continued its evening routine. People heading home from work, restaurants filling up, the machinery of normal life grinding forward. None of them knew that 2 hours south, a man he'd never met had just declared war on his family's legacy. He should call his lawyer, call the county, call someone who knew how to fight this kind of bureaucratic assault. Instead, he pulled out his father's letter and read it again. That's the burden of stewardship, protecting people who don't even know you're there. Rachel's firm occupied the third floor of a modest building near Denver's art district. Not prestigious enough for the big developers, but respectable enough to attract steady work. Or it had been until the recession hit and projects dried up like creeks in August. Her partner Jessica Martinez had been with her for 8 years. Sharp mind, sharper sense of humor, the kind of loyalty that couldn't be bought but had to be earned. Now she sat across from Rachel's desk, reading the Thornton contract with an expression that grew darker with each page. He wants you to falsify data. Rachel nodded. Essentially, yes. Jessica set the contract down. This is an $85,000 contract. We're $140,000 in debt. We can't turn this down because it involves your ex-husband's property. I'm not turning it down because of Marcus. I'm turning it down because Garrett Thornton wants me to lie. He wants me to certify that a dam I haven't examined poses environmental hazards I have no evidence exist. Then do an honest assessment. Jessica leaned forward, hands clasped. Go to the site, test the water, survey the ecosystem. If it's actually hazardous, document it. If it's safe, say so. Professional integrity. And when Garrett fires us for not giving him the conclusion he paid for, that's the risk of having ethics, Rachel. But we lose more by being corrupt than we do by being broke. Rachel's phone buzzed. Emma calling again. She let it go to voicemail, unable to handle her daughter's pain on top of her own decisions. Jessica watched her with the careful attention of someone who'd seen Rachel navigate difficult choices before. You still love him, don't you? The question hung in the air between them like smoke. I love who he could have been. Rachel's voice was quiet. I love the man I married before he decided career advancement mattered more than showing up. But that man's been gone for years. I don't know if he's coming back. Maybe this dam fight will tell you. Maybe. Or maybe it'll just be another thing he abandons when it gets difficult. That evening, Rachel drove to Emma's dorm in Fort Collins. Her daughter lived in a converted Victorian house near the Colorado State campus, sharing a room with another environmental science major. Emma met her at the front door, eyes red from crying. They walked to a coffee shop 3 blocks away. The kind of place that served overpriced lattes to undergrads while acoustic guitar played from ceiling speakers. Emma ordered something with too many adjectives. Rachel got black coffee. Mom, I need to know something. Emma wrapped her hands around her cup. Why did you and Dad really divorce? You were 16. We told you we grew apart. I'm 19 now. Tell me the truth. Rachel looked at her daughter, saw Tom's eyes looking back at her. That same direct gaze that cut through pretense. Emma deserved honesty. Your father is brilliant, dedicated, hardworking. But he measured his worth by his career achievements. Every dinner was interrupted by work calls. Every vacation was cut short for emergencies. Your school plays, my business struggles, his father's loneliness. All of it was secondary to important projects. Did you stop loving him? I left because I loved myself enough to want a partner, not a roommate who occasionally showed up. Rachel sipped her coffee. It was bitter and exactly what she needed. Love isn't enough when someone can't be present. Emma's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Do you still love him? Rachel considered lying, considered the easy answer that would protect them both. But Emma was 19 and had already learned that life delivered hard truths, whether you were ready for them or not. Part of me always will. He's a good man who forgot how to show up. But love isn't enough when someone repeatedly chooses everything else over you. Grandpa showed up. Emma's tears started again. Every day. For everyone. Yes, and maybe that's why your father ran. He saw his dad's simple life and thought it meant failure. But Tom Hayes was richer than anyone in that valley. He had purpose, community, respect. Your father chased success and missed the whole point. Emma wiped her eyes with a napkin. Is it too late for Dad to learn? I don't know, honey, but this fight over the dam? Maybe it's his last chance to figure out what kind of man he wants to be. They sat in silence for a while. Around them, other students laughed and studied and lived lives that hadn't been broken by divorce and death. Rachel envied them their uncomplicated evenings. Mom, I need to tell you something. Emma's voice was steadier now. I'm going to help Dad with the dam. Rachel's heart clenched. That's your choice to make. I know, but I'm not doing it for him. I'm doing it for Grandpa. She pulled out her phone and showed Rachel a photo. It's from Grandpa's journal, the entry from the day I was born. Rachel looked at the image. Tom's careful handwriting filled the page. Became a great-grandfather today. Emma, Rachel Hayes, 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Perfect. Marcus called from the hospital, crying happy tears. Said, Dad, I want to be the kind of father you were to me. Present, dedicated, there for every moment. I told him, then remember this feeling. When work calls and she needs you, choose her. When ambition pulls and she needs you, choose her. You only get one chance to be her father. He promised. I hope he keeps it better than I kept mine. Emma's voice cracked. He broke that promise, Mom, every single day. Rachel pulled her daughter close. Let him prove himself now, not with words but with actions. Let him show you who he's become. The Thornton Ridge Community Center hosted a women's coffee group every Wednesday morning. Janet Reeves had been attending for 12 years. This week, only 8 women showed up. The others were probably tired of hearing about HOA politics. Janet set down her coffee cup with enough force to make it click against the saucer. Ladies, I need to talk about Garrett's dam crusade. Helen Wu, 73 and still sharp despite her grief over losing her husband, looked up from stirring cream into her coffee. Is this about the Hayes property? Exactly. Janet pulled a folder from her bag. Garrett presented at last week's HOA meeting, showed pictures of dam collapses from other states, said Hayes Dam is dangerous, got 50 people to sign a petition demanding removal. Patricia Morrison, 65, and Bear Morrison's younger sister, frowned. She'd spent 30 years as a nurse before retiring. Is it actually dangerous? The dam is over 100 years old. Diane Thornton sat in the corner, quiet as always. She rarely spoke at these gatherings anymore. Not since her divorce 2 years ago had stripped her of her confidence and half her assets. But now she looked up, her voice carrying an edge that silenced the other conversations. Garrett lies when it serves him. Everyone turned. Diane never spoke about her ex-husband, never discussed the marriage that had ended in sealed court documents and non-disclosure agreements that carried financial penalties if broken. Diane continued, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup, like it was the only solid thing in a shifting world. I was married to him for 19 years. He lies to investors. He lied to me. He'll lie to you. Helen leaned forward. But he's HOA president. Wouldn't he protect the community? He protects his investments. Diane's voice was flat, empty of emotion in a way that suggested she'd felt too much for too long. That dam sits on land he wants for his resort development. Truth doesn't matter to Garrett, only profit. Janet felt something shift in the room. These were women who'd lived in Pinewood Valley for decades. They'd raised children here, buried parents, built lives in this mountain community. They recognized the sound of truth when they heard it. Helen's voice trembled slightly. I invested $80,000 in his resort project. Are you saying I should worry? Diane met her eyes. I'm saying verify everything he tells you, because I didn't verify anything during our marriage. I trusted him, and I lost everything in our divorce because of that trust. The silence that followed carried weight. Janet picked up her coffee with hands that were steadier than her voice. If the dam isn't actually dangerous, why is Garrett lying about it? Because he needs it destroyed for his development plans to work. Diane stood up, gathering her purse. And he'll sacrifice anyone to get what he wants. Consider yourselves warned. She left before anyone could respond. The remaining women sat in stunned silence, processing implications they weren't ready to face. Patricia Morrison finally spoke. I think we need to look into this more carefully. Marcus spent 3 days researching HOA law and water rights. His engineering background made him comfortable with technical documentation, but legal language was a different beast entirely. He needed help. Victor Reyes answered on the second ring. Marcus, I was expecting your call. You know about the HOA letter? Son, I've known about Garrett Thornton's plans for 5 years. Your father consulted with me regularly. We were preparing a legal defense when Tom died. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest, relief mixed with guilt. His father had been fighting this battle alone while Marcus was billing hours in Denver. What did you find? Victor's voice carried the satisfaction of a lawyer who'd done his homework. Your family never joined the HOA. Your grandfather specifically refused membership in 1954 when it formed. The property boundaries are clearly documented. Hayes land predates Thornton Ridge development by 83 years. So the fees are fraudulent? Completely, but Marcus, you need to understand what you're up against. Garrett doesn't fight legally, he fights expensive. He'll bury you in motions and inspections and fees until you can't afford to keep fighting. Why does he want the dam destroyed so badly? Victor paused. I've done some digging. Garrett owns 63% of the upstream parcels through various shell companies. He filed preliminary development plans 3 years ago for Thornton Ridge Resort and Spa. The plans require rerouting water for artificial lakes and golf courses. So he wants to replace natural flood control with decorative ponds. Worse than that, he needs your dam removed to increase his property values. That pond of yours? According to his marketing materials, it's a stagnant swamp lowering the aesthetic appeal of his development. Marcus felt anger building in his chest, the clean kind that burned away confusion and left clarity. My father protected this valley for 60 years, and this developer wants to destroy it for a golf course? There's something else. Victor's tone shifted. Your father's journals mention a 1951 document, Pinewood Valley Flood Control Compact. If I'm reading the references correctly, your family has federal authority to maintain watershed protection for the entire downstream area. What does that mean? It means Garrett just picked a fight with the only person who has legal standing to stop his development. But Marcus, I need to tell you something. Your father died on April 6th while working on annual compliance reports. The last filing was never submitted. If Garrett's lawyers find that gap, they'll argue the compact is void due to non-compliance. Can I file the report now? Yes, but you'll need current structural assessment, water quality analysis, ecosystem documentation. That's $15,000 to $20,000 worth of professional work. Marcus thought about his savings, the mortgage on his Denver condo, the legal fees this fight would require. I'm a hydraulic engineer, I can do the assessments myself. Victor chuckled. Your father said the same thing. Stubborn runs in the Hayes family. After hanging up, Marcus sat in his father's workshop. The cottage was exactly as Tom had left it. Coffee cup on the desk, half full and long cold. Tools hung in precise order on pegboard walls. Journals stacked chronologically on shelves built from the same limestone that formed the dam. Marcus opened the most recent journal. His father's handwriting filled every page with observations about water flow, wildlife activity, maintenance performed. The entries read like love letters written to a valley that would never write back. April 3rd, repaired south spillway, stone 17 showing minor erosion, replaced mortar, flow patterns normal for spring melt, saw family of beavers working upstream. Nature is the best engineer. We just have to pay attention. April 5th. Marcus called, asked about my health, lied and said I'm fine. Truth is, my heart's been acting up again. Doctor says I need to slow down, get help with maintenance. But I can't ask Marcus. He has his life in Denver. Important work. I won't be the father who guilt trips his son into abandoning his career. Marcus closed the journal, unable to read more. His father had been sick, had needed help, had died alone rather than burden his son. The weight of that crushed something in Marcus's chest that he'd been holding rigid for years. His phone rang. Unknown number with a local area code. This is Marcus Hayes. Mr. Hayes, this is Patricia Morrison, Bear Morrison's sister. I was a friend of your father's. Marcus remembered her from the funeral. Older woman with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Patricia continued. I'm calling because I witnessed something concerning. County Inspector Daniel Cross came to examine your dam yesterday. I was there dropping off a casserole. I watched his inspection. And, Mr. Hayes, I assisted my brother with structural assessments for 30 years when he was fire chief. Inspector Cross spent 12 minutes looking at your dam. He never took measurements, never used testing equipment, never even touched the foundation. That wasn't an inspection. That was theater. Marcus felt the anger return, hotter now. What happened after? He filed a report claiming immediate demolition is required due to catastrophic structural failure. The report specifically mentioned severe foundation erosion typical of 1960s concrete construction. Marcus almost laughed. My dam is hand-cut limestone from 1922. There is no concrete in the original structure. Exactly. Which means he filed a fraudulent report about a structure he never properly examined. Patricia's voice hardened. I took photographs of his inspection, Mr. Hayes, or lack thereof. If you need evidence that this is a coordinated attack, I have it. Why are you helping me? Because your father saved my nephew's life 30 years ago. Danny Morrison was 8 years old and fell into the creek during spring runoff. The current was vicious. Your father knew exactly where to position himself because he understood water flow from maintaining that dam. He pulled Danny out and gave him CPR on the bank. My nephew is 38 now with 2 children of his own. Patricia paused. Your father never asked for thanks, never mentioned it again, just went back to his quiet work protecting people who didn't know he existed. That's who Tom Hayes was. And I'm not letting some corrupt developer destroy what Tom spent 60 years building. Marcus felt something shift inside him. Not quite hope, but close enough to feel dangerous. Thank you, Mrs. Morrison. Call me Patricia. And Marcus? Your father would be proud that you're fighting this. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. After they hung up, Marcus walked down to the dam. Evening sun painted the limestone blocks amber and gold. Water flowed over the spillway with a sound his grandfather had first heard in 1922. Constant, reliable, eternal. His phone buzzed. Text from Emma. Dad, I found something in Grandpa's journals. We need to talk. He called her immediately. Em? Her voice carried an edge of excitement mixed with anger. I've been reading Grandpa's journals. Cover to cover, there's an entry from when you and Mom got married. He wrote about the advice he gave you. What advice? That you needed to show up, be present, choose family over career when it mattered. Emma's voice cracked slightly. He wrote that you promised you'd be different than he was, that you'd learn from his mistakes. Marcus sat down on the dam wall, suddenly needing support. I did promise that. So what happened? When did the promise stop mattering? The question hit harder than any legal threat or HOA letter. When did the promise stop mattering? Marcus tried to remember. Tried to pinpoint the exact moment when career advancement became more important than his daughter's school plays. When business calls started interrupting dinners. When just one more project turned into a lifestyle that excluded everything else. I don't know, Em. Somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that success meant moving up, making more money, taking on bigger projects. I thought I was building a better life for you and your mom. But we didn't need a better life. Emma's words came faster now, pressured by emotion too long contained. We needed you. Mom needed a husband who came home for dinner. I needed a dad who showed up to my soccer games. Grandpa needed a son who called him back. The truth of it was undeniable. You're right, Marcus said, about all of it. So prove it now. Fight for Grandpa's dam, not because you have to, because it's the right thing to do. I will. I'm coming this weekend. Emma's tone shifted to something more practical. I'm bringing surveying equipment from Grandpa's tools. We're going to document everything and file that compliance report. Together. You don't have to do that. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for Grandpa. But maybe if I see you actually show up and do the work consistently for something that matters, maybe then we can start to fix what's broken between us. After Emma hung up, Marcus sat alone on the dam his grandfather had built with hand tools and determination. The sun set behind western peaks, the valley filled with shadows that carried the weight of 100 years. He pulled out his father's letter one more time. Read the closing lines. Be a better father to Emma than I was to you. She needs you even if she doesn't say it. For the first time in years, Marcus understood what he had to do. Not because it would advance his career or prove his intelligence or earn recognition, but because some things mattered more than success. Some responsibilities couldn't be delegated or postponed or managed from a distance. The dam wasn't just stone and water, it was a promise made across generations. A commitment to protect what needed protecting, even when nobody noticed, especially when nobody noticed. Marcus stood up, looked at the valley spreading below him in twilight. 200 families living their lives, unaware that this dam stood between them and annual flooding. Unaware that his father had died maintaining their protection. Unaware that Garrett Thornton was willing to destroy a century of engineering for short-term profit. They were about to become very aware. His phone buzzed one final time. Text from Rachel. I've been hired to do environmental assessment of your dam by Garrett Thornton. I wanted you to know before you heard it from someone else. I'm going to do honest work, even though it will probably cost me the contract. Some things matter more than money. Your father knew that. I hope you're learning it. Marcus typed a response, deleted it, typed another. Finally settled on something simple. Thank you for having integrity when I didn't. I'm sorry for everything. Her response came 30 seconds later. Show Emma who you're becoming, not who you were. That's the only apology that matters. Marcus pocketed his phone and walked back to the cottage. Inside his father's workshop, journals waited to teach him 60 years of lessons he'd been too busy to learn. Outside, a dam stood ready to test whether Marcus Hayes could become the kind of man his family needed. The kind of man who protected things that mattered, even when it cost everything. The fight for Hayes Dam was just beginning. But for the first time in years, Marcus felt like he was fighting for something worth the cost. Diane Thornton's apartment sat on the third floor of a converted textile mill, the kind of industrial building that developers had transformed into loft spaces with exposed brick and too much rent. She'd moved here after the divorce, trading the 5-bedroom house in Thornton Ridge for 800 square feet and the freedom of not sharing space with a man who'd spent 19 years lying to her face. Tonight, 5 women gathered around her salvaged dining table. The coffee was strong. The mood was stronger. Janet Reeves arrived first, carrying a folder thick with HOA meeting minutes. Patricia Morrison came next, her nurse's efficiency evident in how she scanned the apartment for the cleanest seat. Helen Wu brought homemade almond cookies she'd stress-baked at 2 in the morning. Rachel Chen was the last to arrive, her professional wardrobe slightly rumpled from the drive down from Denver. Diane spread documents across the table like a dealer revealing a winning hand. Thank you all for coming. I know meeting in secret about HOA business is unusual, but what I'm going to show you can't be shared publicly. Not yet. The documents told a story that turned coffee bitter in throats. Financial records from Thornton Development Group spanning 6 years showed payments to consulting firms that existed only on paper. Shell companies shared Garrett's business address. $380,000 had moved from HOA accounts into businesses that never provided services, never submitted invoices, never existed beyond incorporation papers filed in Delaware. Helen Wu's hands trembled as she touched the spreadsheet. I gave him $80,000, my husband's life insurance money. Garrett promised the resort investment was safe. Rachel leaned forward, her environmental consultant's mind processing the data with clinical precision. Let me make sure I understand. Garrett has been embezzling from HOA funds to finance a fraudulent resort development. He needs Hayes Dam destroyed to inflate property values long enough to sell more shares before the scheme collapses. Diane's voice carried the flatness of someone who'd cried until tears no longer came. Exactly. The resort will never be built. He just needs 6 more months to sell enough shares to cover his debts from previous failed projects. Then he disappears. People like Helen lose everything. The silence that followed had weight and texture. These were women who'd raised families in Pinewood Valley. They'd organized bake sales and coached youth soccer, and sat through endless HOA meetings about mailbox colors and fence heights. Now they were learning their community had been systematically looted by the man they'd elected 9 consecutive times as president. Patricia Morrison spoke with the authority of someone who'd spent 3 decades making life-or-death decisions in emergency rooms. What do we do with this information? Police? Janet shook her head. Sheriff's Department has been friendly with Garrett. Campaign donations. We need someone outside local influence. I've already contacted a federal prosecutor. Diane pulled another folder from her bag. Sent anonymous tip with copies of these documents. But federal investigations take months. Garrett's demolition timeline is weeks. We need to slow him down, buy time for the investigation to catch up. Rachel studied the financial records with the focus that had made her firm successful before the recession nearly killed it. These shell companies all share incorporation dates, all registered within 3 months of each other. That's not coincidence. That's planning. She looked up at the other women. This isn't just embezzlement, it's wire fraud, mail fraud, probably RICO violations if we can prove pattern. Garrett could face 20 years federal time. Helen's voice barely rose above a whisper. Will we get our money back? Rachel's honesty was gentle but unsparing. Some of it, maybe 30% if the feds recover assets. But Helen, most of it is gone, spent on maintaining previous frauds or hidden offshore. Helen closed her eyes, nodded. At least he'll face justice. The women looked at each other across the table. An unlikely alliance formed from necessity and shared betrayal. A retired teacher, a widowed investor, a divorced insider, a nurse, an environmental consultant trying to do the right thing while her business crumbled. Patricia pulled out her phone and displayed photographs. I have evidence that County Inspector Daniel Cross performed a fraudulent inspection. 12 minutes total. No measurements, no testing equipment. The report he filed describes concrete construction from the 1960s. Hayes Dam is limestone from 1922. Janet added her piece. I can organize the HOA members who voted against demolition. We were outvoted, but we're not powerless. We can demand a special meeting to reconsider. Helen's contribution came wrapped in pain. I'll contact other resort investors. If they know it's a scam, some will turn on Garrett. He needs their continued belief to keep the scheme alive. Rachel tapped the financial records. My environmental assessment will prove the dam is beneficial, not hazardous. I'll submit copies to county, state EPA, Army Corps of Engineers. Make it impossible for Garrett to claim environmental justification. Diane gathered the documents with practiced efficiency. I know Garrett's patterns. He's desperate now. Desperate men make mistakes. We just need to provoke him into revealing himself. Janet posed the question they were all thinking. What about Marcus Hayes? Should we tell him we're helping? Rachel's answer came after a pause that revealed more than words could. No, let him think he's fighting alone for now. He needs to prove he can show up for something that matters. Not because we're making it easy, but because it's right. Diane studied Rachel's face. You still care about him. I care about his daughter. And I care that someone finally stands up to Garrett, even if that someone is my ex-husband who couldn't stand up for his own marriage. The meeting ended near midnight. The women left separately, at intervals, like resistance fighters leaving a clandestine gathering, which Rachel supposed they were, resisting the corruption that had infected their community, fighting back the only way they could, quietly, strategically, with evidence instead of emotions. Marcus's phone rang at 6:15 Saturday morning. He'd been awake since 4, reading his father's journals by lamplight in the cottage workshop, learning 60 years of watershed management, one careful entry at a time. Emma's voice carried the energy of someone who'd driven 2 hours fueled by determination and gas station coffee. I'm 10 minutes out. Have the surveying equipment ready. The sun was barely clearing the eastern peaks when her grandfather's 1978 Ford pickup turned into the gravel drive. Emma emerged wearing Tom's old fishing vest over a Colorado State hoodie. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked like her mother at 19, all fierce focus and unwillingness to accept excuses. I'm not here for you. She said it before Marcus could offer a greeting. I'm here for Grandpa. I understand. No, you don't. Emma pulled equipment from the truck bed with efficient movements. You don't understand that he spent 60 years maintaining this dam because it mattered. Not because it made him rich or famous. Because it protected people. Marcus resisted the urge to defend himself. She was right. Acknowledgement seemed more valuable than argument. They worked in tense silence for the first hour, taking measurements of water flow using instruments Tom had calibrated and maintained for decades, documenting dam structure with photographs and detailed notes, reviewing maintenance records that showed the systematic care Tom had invested in protecting a valley that barely knew his name. Marcus showed Emma how to read water patterns the way his grandfather had taught him 30 years ago, before career ambition had convinced him such knowledge was quaint and obsolete. See how the current flows here? He gestured to the spillway where water tumbled over hand-cut limestone. Your great-grandfather designed this overflow to release water gradually, not all at once. During spring melt, this prevents flooding downstream. Emma's interest fought with her anger. So the dam isn't just holding water back, it's managing release, working with natural cycles instead of trying to control them. Marcus heard the metaphor in his own words. The same lesson applied to relationships, to fatherhood, to every aspect of life he'd tried to control through force of will and professional achievement. They broke for lunch sitting on the dam wall, sandwiches Emma had packed, coffee from a thermos that had belonged to Tom. The March air carried the smell of pine and snowmelt and possibilities that might already be too late. Mom's environmental report says the dam is healthy. Emma's tone was carefully neutral, but Garrett's going to fire her firm for not lying. Marcus felt the guilt settle deeper. Your mother has always had more integrity than I deserve. She loved you, you know. Emma's words came faster, pressured by emotions too long contained, really loved you. But you kept choosing work over her, over me, over Grandpa. Why? The question Marcus had been avoiding since the divorce, since his father's funeral, since every missed moment he'd traded for career advancement, that meant nothing now. Because I was terrified. The admission hurt coming out. Your great-grandfather built this dam with his hands. Grandpa maintained it his whole life. Both of them lived simple lives in a small town. Everyone respected them, but they never achieved anything big. Never made national news or won awards or got recognized beyond this valley. And I was afraid that if I stayed here, if I chose family and community over career, I'd be small, unremarkable, a failure. Emma's voice cracked. You think Grandpa was a failure? No. God, no. Marcus stared at the water flowing with the same constancy it had shown for a century. But I thought I'd be failing if I became like him. If I measured success by relationships instead of promotions, by presence instead of prestige. He protected 200 families for 60 years. Emma wasn't crying, but her eyes held unshed tears. He saved Bear Morrison's son from drowning. He taught me to fish and told me stories about great-grandpa's engineering genius. He made me feel loved every single day. The truth of it was devastating in its simplicity. I was wrong, Marcus said. About everything. Your grandfather was more successful than I'll ever be because he knew what mattered. And I wasted 15 years chasing recognition while missing everything real. So what now? Now I fight for this dam. Not to prove I was right. Not to win against Garrett Thornton. But because it's the right thing to do. And because maybe if I can protect what Grandpa built, you'll see I'm trying to become the man he was. Emma studied him with eyes that saw too much. I need to see it, Dad. Not hear promises. See actions. Consistently. I understand. They returned to work. The afternoon sun painted the valley in gold and amber. They measured and documented, and slowly, carefully, began to build something between them that resembled trust. Or at least the foundation upon which trust might eventually be constructed. Rachel's office felt smaller than usual Monday morning. Jessica sat across the desk with the Thornton contract and an expression that suggested the weekend had not improved their situation. He called 3 times. Jessica's voice was flat. Wants to know when we're starting the assessment. Rachel had spent Saturday conducting the most thorough environmental study of her career. Water samples, ecosystem surveys, sediment analysis, photographic documentation. 6 hours of meticulous work that would prove Hayes Dam was not only safe but ecologically valuable. I completed the assessment Saturday. And the dam supports one of the healthiest freshwater ecosystems I've surveyed in Colorado. 23 species of fish, thriving aquatic insect populations, nesting waterfowl, natural filtration through layered sediment beds. Water quality exceeds EPA standards for clarity and dissolved oxygen. Jessica closed her eyes. So you're going to tell Garrett his environmental hazard claim is complete fiction. I'm going to submit an honest report, which he'll reject. Then he'll terminate our contract and blacklist us with every developer in the state. Rachel pulled the completed report from her desk drawer. 42 pages of data, analysis, and conclusions that contradicted everything Garrett needed her to say. Probably. But I can't falsify scientific data because a client wants a predetermined conclusion. That's not consulting. That's prostitution. Easy to say when you're not the one whose savings are paying rent on this office. The accusation stung because it was partially true. Jessica had invested 8 years in building this firm, had turned down other opportunities because she believed in what they were creating. Now Rachel's ethics were about to cost them both everything they'd worked for. I know, Rachel said quietly, and I'm sorry. But if we lie on this report, we become exactly what's wrong with the industry. We become the consultants who tell clients what they want to hear instead of what's actually true. Jessica stood up. Fine, submit your honest report. Get us fired. Destroy our reputation. But don't pretend it's noble when it's just you being unable to separate your ex-husband's property from professional judgment. The door closed harder than necessary. Rachel sat alone in her office with the report that would probably end her business and the knowledge that some prices were worth paying. Her phone buzzed. Text from Garrett Thornton. Need that report by end of business today. Investors asking questions. Don't disappoint me. Rachel typed a response, deleted it, typed another. Finally settled on professional brevity. Report complete. You won't like the conclusion.
is sending now.
She attached the PDF and hit send before doubt could stop her. 42 pages of truth flying through digital space to land in the inbox of a man who'd built an empire on lies. The response came 6 minutes later, a phone call, not a text. Rachel let it ring twice before answering. Garrett's voice carried the controlled fury of a man used to getting his way. Your environmental report is unacceptable. It's accurate. Hayes Dam supports a thriving ecosystem and provides essential flood control services. I hired you to find environmental hazards, not write love letters to my opponent's property. You hired me to conduct an honest assessment. Rachel kept her voice level. That's what I did. If the dam posed genuine hazards, I would have documented them. It doesn't. The silence on the other end felt dangerous. I'm terminating our contract. Garrett's words came crisp and final. And I'll make sure every developer in Colorado knows Chen & Associates isn't a team player. Your firm is finished. Are you threatening my professional reputation because I won't falsify scientific data? I'm protecting my investment from biased consultants who let personal relationships compromise their work. You're Marcus Hayes' ex-wife. This is obvious conflict of interest. Then you should have disclosed that before hiring me. Rachel felt her own anger rising now. But you knew exactly what you were doing. Trying to co-opt someone close to Marcus to legitimize your fraud. Fraud is a strong accusation. I'm an environmental consultant. I know when someone's trying to manipulate data to destroy natural resources for profit. In my field, we call that fraud. The line went dead. Rachel sat holding her phone, processing what she'd just done, ended her largest contract, made an enemy of the most connected developer in the region. Probably destroyed her firm's future for the sake of a dam owned by a man who destroyed their marriage. Jessica appeared in the doorway. I heard. Her voice was softer now. You really did it. I really did it. Jessica sat down into the client chair. Okay, so we rebuild. Start over with honest work and hope integrity eventually pays the bills. Rachel looked at her partner with gratitude that had no words adequate to express it. You're staying? I'm pissed at you. But I'm not abandoning ship. Jessica managed a small smile. Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't go completely broke pursuing righteous causes. That evening, Rachel called Emma. Her daughter answered on the first ring. Mom, honey, I need to tell you something. Garrett fired my firm today because I wouldn't lie about the dam. Emma's sharp intake of breath carried through the phone. Your business? We'll survive or won't. But I'll survive knowing I did the right thing. Your grandfather did that every day. Maybe it's time I learned from him. I love you, Mom. I love you too. Rachel paused. And Em, your father is trying. I see it. Give him a chance to prove he's changed. After hanging up, Rachel sat in her empty office. Through the window, Denver's evening lights reflected off glass towers built by developers who probably never thought twice about the consultants they pressured to bend data. The city felt colder than usual, more hostile. Her phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. Jessica told me what happened. I'm sorry, you didn't have to sacrifice your business for my family's dam. Rachel stared at the message for a long moment, then typed a response. Some things matter more than money. Your father knew that. I hope you're learning it. Marcus replied immediately. I'm trying. Thank you for having integrity when I didn't. Rachel felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the foundation upon which forgiveness could eventually be built. Show Emma who you're becoming. That's the only apology that matters. Bear Morrison had lived in Pinewood Valley for 68 years. He'd fought fires for 35 of them, retiring as chief with commendations and the respect of everyone who'd ever seen him run into burning buildings while others ran out. His sister Patricia had the same steel in her spine, the same unwillingness to tolerate corruption. Now Bear sat in Marcus's father's workshop, spreading financial records across the workbench like evidence at a crime scene. Son, I need to show you something. Been eating at me for 3 years. Bear's voice carried the weight of delayed confession. I was HOA treasurer from 2018 to 2020. Started noticing irregularities in our accounts. He pointed to line items that told a story of systematic theft. $45,000 annually to Thornton Valley Landscaping, owned by Garrett's brother-in-law. Services supposedly rendered but work done by volunteers. $30,000 in legal consulting fees paid to Mountain Ridge Legal, a company that shared Garrett's business address. $18,000 for emergency maintenance performed by firms with no employees, no equipment, no existence beyond invoices. I raised questions in 2020. Bear's hands, scarred from decades of emergency response, trembled slightly. Garrett had me removed as treasurer, said I was too old to understand modern accounting practices. Marcus studied the records with an engineer's eye for patterns. Why didn't you go to police? I tried. Sheriff said HOA finances are civil matter, not criminal. Without proof of actual fraud, just suspicion of irregularities, they wouldn't investigate. But this is proof. Now it is. Bear gathered the pages together. Because other people are finding the same patterns. Patricia's documenting county inspection fraud. Diane Thornton's providing insider evidence. Your ex-wife refused to falsify environmental data even though it cost her firm. Marcus looked up sharply. Rachel lost her contract? More than that. Bear's expression was grim. Garrett's blacklisting her with every developer in the state. She's facing bankruptcy for refusing to lie about your dam. The guilt was physical. She did that? For me? Not for you. Bear's voice hardened. For the truth. But maybe ask yourself this. Why is your ex-wife willing to sacrifice her business for your family's dam when you couldn't sacrifice one weekend for your father's birthday? The question landed like a punch. Marcus had no answer that wouldn't sound like an excuse. Bear's tone gentled slightly. Tom and I talked about you often. He knew you were running from something, afraid of becoming him. But Marcus, your father was the richest man I ever knew. Rich in friendship, rich in purpose, rich in legacy that will outlast any corporate achievement. He saved my son's life. Bear's voice caught. Danny was 8 years old, fell into the creek during spring runoff. Current was vicious. Your father knew exactly where to position himself because he understood water flow from maintaining that dam. Pulled Danny out and gave him CPR right there on the bank. Marcus hadn't known this story. His father had never mentioned it. My son is 38 now, with 2 kids of his own. Bear continued. All because your father spent 60 years learning how water moves through this valley. That knowledge, that dedication, that quiet service. That's the inheritance Tom left you, not just land or stone. The understanding that some responsibilities matter more than recognition. Marcus felt the full weight of what his father had been, what he'd spent a lifetime running from. The simple, profound truth that presence mattered more than prestige. I'm trying to learn that, he said quietly. Then stop trying and start doing. Bear stood up, 6 feet of weathered determination. Your daughter's watching, your ex-wife's watching, this whole valley's watching. Show us your Tom Hayes' son. After Bear left, Marcus sat alone in the workshop, surrounded by his father's tools and journals. Each item told a story of careful maintenance. Each entry documented quiet dedication. The accumulated evidence of a life spent protecting people who never knew his name. Marcus opened his laptop and began documenting the financial evidence Bear had provided. Cross-referenced shell companies, traced incorporation dates, built spreadsheets that revealed the systematic nature of Garrett's theft. 3 hours later, he had something approaching a prosecutable case. Pattern evidence, timeline documentation, financial trails that led directly back to Garrett Thornton and his network of phantom companies. His phone rang, number he didn't recognize. This is Marcus Hayes. Mr. Hayes, this is Christina Vega from the Denver Post. I'm an investigative journalist specializing in municipal corruption. I received some interesting documents about HOA fraud in Pinewood Valley. Marcus felt hope kindle. Who sent you the documents? Sources confidential. But I've been investigating HOA embezzlement schemes for 2 years. Your case fits a pattern I'm tracking. I'd like to interview you and anyone else willing to go on record about Garrett Thornton's activities. What do you need? Everything you have. Financial records, witness statements, documentation of fraudulent inspections. I need to build an airtight case before publication. These stories can't just be allegations. They need to be proof. I can provide that. Good. Christina's voice carried the satisfaction of a hunter who just found a trail. Because from what I'm seeing, Garrett Thornton isn't just stealing from your HOA. This is part of a larger pattern of investment fraud spanning multiple states. If I can prove it, this story goes national. After they hung up, Marcus allowed himself a moment of something that felt like optimism. The pieces were coming together, evidence mounting, allies emerging from unexpected places. The fight against Garrett wasn't just his anymore. It was becoming a movement. Emma called at 9 that evening. Dad, I did something. You might be mad. What happened? I contacted Dr. Patricia Wong. She's my hydrology professor at CSU. Told her about the dam situation. She wants to help. Emma, you didn't have to do that. I know, but she said Hayes Dam is a perfect case study in historic watershed management. She'll do a comprehensive assessment pro bono if it means preserving it. She's bringing grad students this weekend. Marcus felt something warm spread through his chest. Thank you, Em. Don't thank me yet. She's tough. She'll find any real problems if they exist. I know the dam is solid. Your great-grandfather built it right. Emma's voice carried a note of cautious optimism. We're going to save it, Dad. Together. After hanging up, Marcus walked down to the dam in darkness. Stars overhead, water flowing below. The sound his grandfather had first heard in 1922, constant and reliable across a century. He thought about Rachel sacrificing her business for truth, about Bear keeping evidence for 3 years, waiting for the right moment, about Patricia documenting fraud with a nurse's precision, about Diane risking legal consequences to expose her ex-husband, about Emma giving him one more chance to prove he could show up. None of them were doing this for him. They were doing it because it was right, because Tom Hayes had spent 60 years protecting their valley, and they were returning the favor, because some things mattered more than convenience or profit or personal comfort. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened the Notes app, started writing what would become his testimony for Christina Vega's investigation. The full story of Garrett Thornton's campaign against Hayes Dam, the fraudulent inspection, the embezzlement evidence, the investment scheme that had stolen Helen Wu's husband's life insurance money. He wrote until midnight, documented everything, built a case with the same precision he'd once applied to engineering reports that earned bonuses and promotions. But this time he was building something that mattered, protecting something worth protecting. Finally understanding what his father had tried to teach him before it was too late. The next morning brought developments that changed everything. Patricia Morrison called at 7. Marcus, you need to get to the dam now. He was there in 5 minutes, pulling up to find Patricia standing near the spillway with her phone out, photographing fresh damage. Someone was here last night. She pointed to gouges in the mortar between limestone blocks. Sledgehammer marks. 8 separate impact points, all on critical structural joints. Marcus examined the damage with growing horror. This wasn't random vandalism. This was surgical sabotage. Whoever had done this understood engineering well enough to know exactly where to strike for maximum effect during spring melt. Patricia showed him photos she'd taken the previous evening at 11. I couldn't sleep. Saw truck headlights from my house. Watched through binoculars. 3 men. 32 minutes of systematic damage. I recorded everything. Marcus looked at her security footage on her phone. The truck had no visible license plate, but there was a distinctive dent on the tailgate. One of the men had an obvious limp, left leg. Garrett's brother-in-law, Marcus said. Rick Thornton, construction accident in 2019 left him with permanent damage. Patricia nodded grimly. I filed a report with the sheriff, but without clear identification, they won't arrest anyone. This is going to cause a breach during spring melt. I know. Patricia's voice was steady, but her eyes held worry, which is exactly what Garrett wants. The dam fails, his neighborhood floods, and he blames you for not maintaining it properly. Marcus called Sarah Matthews, the structural engineer who'd done his independent assessment. She arrived within the hour, bringing ground-penetrating radar and stress sensors. Her verdict was delivered with professional precision. This damage is strategic. They hit exactly the right points to cause controlled failure under high water pressure. Normally, your dam could handle 200% of average spring flow. With this damage, at 150% flow, you're looking at significant breach. Not total collapse, but major uncontrolled release. How long do we have? Spring melt is 3 weeks out, peak flow in 4 weeks. You need to repair this immediately or the dam fails, and 47 homes downstream flood. The dilemma crystallized with brutal clarity. Repair cost $70,000 Marcus didn't have. Timeline was impossibly tight, and any failure would be blamed on him for inadequate maintenance, never on Garrett for sabotage. Patricia touched his arm. Don't even think about letting it fail. I see it in your face. You're thinking Garrett deserves to watch his neighborhood flood. Marcus couldn't deny it. The thought had crossed his mind with seductive clarity. Those 47 families aren't all guilty. Patricia's voice carried the moral authority of someone who'd spent 3 decades in emergency rooms making life and death decisions. Some signed Garrett's petition because they believed his lies. They don't deserve to lose their homes because you want revenge on the man who manipulated them. You're right. Marcus felt the darkness recede. We repair it, whatever it costs. Then we find the money. Patricia pulled out her phone. And I know exactly where to start. The town hall meeting Bear Morrison organized happened faster than Marcus thought possible. Within 72 hours of the Sabotage discovery, 150 people packed Pinewood Community Center on a Tuesday evening. Bear stood at the front, his retired fire chief's authority filling the room. Most of you know me. 35 years protecting this valley. I'm here tonight about a danger you don't know about and a protection you've been taking for granted. He presented the evidence with methodical precision. Dr. Wong's computer models showing flood zones without the dam. Patricia's photographs of the sabotage. Christina Vega's preliminary investigative reporting on Garrett's embezzlement. Historical documentation of Hayes Dam's century of service. The crowd's mood shifted from curiosity to shock to anger as the truth emerged. Janet Reeves stood up. Garrett lied to us. We signed his petition based on false information. That dam isn't dangerous. He made it dangerous. The fundraising happened spontaneously. Local businesses pledged $18,000. Individual donations totaled $12,000. The church committed $7,000 from its emergency fund. The credit union offered a $25,000 low-interest loan. Total raised $62,000, still $8,000 short of what was needed. Then Rachel Chen stood up in the back of the room. Every head turned. Everyone knew Garrett had fired her firm. Everyone knew what she'd sacrificed. I'll cover the rest. Her voice carried clearly through the sudden silence. $10,000 from my business account. The room erupted in applause. Rachel waited for quiet. Tom Hayes protected this valley for 60 years without asking for credit or recognition. The least I can do is help his son protect it for another 60. She looked directly at Marcus across the crowded room. Some things are worth sacrificing for. Marcus stood frozen, overwhelmed by gratitude and guilt, and the sudden understanding that he'd spent 15 years married to a woman whose integrity he'd never fully appreciated. Thank you, he managed to say, his voice rough with emotion. All of you. You're saving something my father spent his life building. I won't let you down. Emma stood beside him. Neither will I. The celebration lasted another hour. People sharing stories about Tom Hayes, about times the dam had prevented flooding, about quiet acts of service Tom had performed without seeking recognition. The accumulated testimony of a life well lived in obscurity. But as the crowd began to disperse, a sheriff's deputy arrived with an envelope that turned triumph into crisis. Mr. Hayes, I'm sorry. Federal judge issued a ruling on Garrett Thornton's eminent domain petition. County has 72 hours to execute demolition or jurisdiction reverts to state. Marcus opened the envelope with hands that wanted to shake. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. Garrett had pushed through an emergency order. The county had 3 days to demolish the dam or lose the authority to do so. Timeline. Repairs needed 10 days minimum. Federal order allowed 72 hours. Spring melt arriving in 3 weeks. Emma gripped his arm. What do we do? We work around the clock. Marcus looked at the people still gathered in the community center. And we pray we finish before they come with bulldozers. The next 48 hours became a blur of coordinated effort that Marcus would later struggle to remember as discrete events. Janet Reeves organized volunteer labor, meal schedules, supply logistics. Patricia filed legal appeals and motions requesting extensions. Rachel expedited environmental permits through state agencies. Diane fed inside information about when Garrett planned to strike. Helen rallied other investors to publicly withdraw support, creating political pressure. Sarah Matthews brought her construction crew. They worked 12-hour shifts. Emma coordinated with Dr. Wong's grad students to monitor water flow and structural stress in real time. Bear Morrison managed site security, keeping watch for further sabotage attempts. Marcus worked alongside them all, learning that leadership sometimes meant getting your hands dirty beside the people you were leading, mixing mortar, setting stone, following the same techniques his great-grandfather had used in 1922. On the third night, working by portable lights with the deadline 8 hours away, Emma found him replacing mortar on the final damaged section. Dad, she said quietly, I'm proud of you. Marcus stopped working, turned to face his daughter in the harsh light of construction lamps. Those 4 words meant more than any professional recognition he'd ever received. I'm trying to be worthy of that. I know. Emma's smile was small but genuine. Grandpa would be proud too. They worked through the night. By dawn on the deadline day, the repairs were complete. $70,000 worth of emergency stonework. 10 days of labor compressed into 72 hours. The dam stood whole again, ready to face spring melt and whatever else Garrett Thornton could throw at it. Marcus stood exhausted beside the spillway, watching water flow over limestone blocks that bore fresh mortar alongside century-old stone. The blend of new and old, past and present, his great-grandfather's vision sustained by his own imperfect efforts. Rachel appeared beside him, coffee in hand. "You did it. We did it." Marcus accepted the coffee gratefully. "I couldn't have done this alone." That's what Tom understood. Rachel's voice was soft. "Protection isn't a solo job. It takes a community." "I'm sorry I didn't understand that sooner." "About a lot of things." Rachel studied him in the morning light. "You're learning. That's more than you were doing 6 months ago." The moment held possibility and danger in equal measure. Marcus wanted to say more, wanted to ask if there was any chance of rebuilding what they'd broken. But words felt inadequate and premature. Emma joined them, her face showing the same exhaustion Marcus felt. "Is it over?" Rachel shook her head. "The repairs are done, but Garrett won't stop. Men like him don't accept defeat gracefully." As if summoned by her words, Marcus's phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "You think you've won, but this is just beginning. That dam is coming down one way or another, and when it does, I'll make sure everyone knows it was your negligence that caused it. Enjoy your temporary victory. It won't last." Marcus showed the message to Rachel and Emma. The threat was clear. Garrett was escalating, moving from legal warfare to something darker and more dangerous. "What do we do?" Emma asked. "We document everything." Marcus's voice was steady despite exhaustion. "We stay vigilant, and we trust that truth eventually wins." But even as he said it, Marcus wondered if he truly believed it. In his experience, truth was often outgunned by money and power, and the willingness to break rules that honorable people followed. The sun rose over Pinewood Valley, painting the mountains in gold and amber. The dam stood whole. The community had rallied, but somewhere in the growing light, Garrett Thornton was planning his next move. And Marcus Hayes, exhausted and determined and finally beginning to understand what his father had known all along, prepared to meet whatever came next. The 72-hour deadline passed at noon on Thursday, with the dam standing whole and county officials standing down. Marcus should have felt relief. Instead, he felt the particular exhaustion that comes from winning a battle while knowing the war continues. Garrett Thornton's threatening text sat in his phone like a coiled snake. "This is just beginning." Victor Reyes called at 2 in the afternoon, his lawyer's voice carrying news wrapped in caution. "Marcus, we need to talk about something I found in your father's papers. Can you come to my office?" The law office smelled the same as it had during the will reading. Old paper and furniture polish, and the accumulated weight of decades spent navigating other people's problems. Victor spread a manila folder across his desk with the careful precision of a man revealing evidence. "Your father kept meticulous records. Every document related to the property going back to when your grandfather first acquired the land in 1920. Victor pulled out a yellowed letter with an official seal. "I found this buried in a file labeled Miscellaneous Correspondence." The letter was dated June 15, 1924. The letterhead read, "Office of the Governor, State of Colorado." Marcus recognized the signature from history books. William Sweet had served as Colorado's governor in the early 20s. Victor put on his reading glasses. "Dear Mr. Hayes, your innovative approach to watershed management represents the future of water conservation in Colorado. Your dam shall serve as a model for future infrastructure development. I hereby designate Hayes Dam as an official state demonstration project for the Colorado Water Conservation Board. This designation grants your structure permanent state protection and immunity from local ordinances. Sincerely, Governor William Sweet." Marcus stared at the letter. "This gives us state protection?" "If it's legitimate, and it appears to be, it supersedes county authority." Victor tapped the official seal. "Local ordinances can't override a governor's explicit protection order. This document has been sitting in your father's files for 100 years, waiting to be needed. Will the current governor honor a century-old designation? That's the question." Victor leaned back in his chair. Governor Jennifer Bradford is a former environmental lawyer, third term. She's politically savvy enough to understand the optics of protecting historic infrastructure versus enabling local corruption. But invoking this will require political courage. How do we approach her? Carefully. With evidence. With documentation showing that county officials are acting in bad faith. Victor pulled out another folder. I've been preparing a comprehensive package: the fraudulent inspection, the embezzlement evidence, Garrett's conviction record from previous failed developments in other states. Marcus looked up sharply. Garrett has a record? Not criminal, but civil judgments from investors who lost money in his Utah and Wyoming projects. Millions in damages awarded but never paid because he hid assets. Victor's expression was grim. This is what he does. Sells dreams, collects investments, disappears when projects fail. Your dam is just the latest obstacle to his next scheme. The weight of what they were fighting became clearer. Not just a property dispute, a pattern of fraud spanning years and states. Victims scattered across the Mountain West, their savings stolen by a man who'd perfected the art of legal theft. We go to the governor, Marcus said. Show her everything. I've already requested a meeting. Victor smiled slightly. Used your father's name. Tom Hayes was known in state water management circles. His 60 years of maintaining that dam without incident earned respect. The governor's chief of staff agreed to see us Monday. 4 days to prepare. 4 days to build a case strong enough to convince a politician to invoke a century-old executive order. 4 days before Garrett made his next move. Marcus drove back to Pinewood Valley as afternoon shadows stretched across the mountains. His phone rang as he passed the turnoff to Thornton Ridge. Emma calling. Dad, where are you? Just leaving Denver. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I'm at the property with Dr. Wong and her team. We've been running flow models all day. She wants to show you something. The Hayes property was busier than Marcus had ever seen it. Dr. Patricia Wong's graduate students had set up monitoring equipment along the creek. Laptop computers displayed real-time water flow data. Emma stood beside a portable whiteboard covered in calculations that looked like higher mathematics crossed with meteorology. Dr. Wong was 39, compact and intense, with the kind of focused energy that suggested she'd forgotten to eat lunch because sediment analysis was more interesting. She greeted Marcus with a handshake, an immediate dive into technical details. Mr. Hayes, your dam is even more sophisticated than I initially thought. She pointed to flowcharts on the whiteboard. Your great-grandfather built this before modern hydrology existed as a formal science, yet he intuitively understood principles we didn't formalize until the 1970s. Emma added context with the pride of a student explaining her professor's work. Dr. Wong's team has been modeling what happens during spring melt with and without the dam. The results are worse than we thought. Dr. Wong pulled up a computer simulation. Current snowpack is sitting at 170% of normal. Climate models predict rapid warming next month. We're looking at the largest spring melt in 40 years. The screen showed animated water flow. Blues turned to yellows, turned to angry reds as projected runoff overwhelmed natural channels. Without your dam, she continued, 47 properties flood for 3 to 4 weeks. But it's not just flooding, it's displacement. Some of these homes would be underwater for long enough to cause structural damage, mold, complete loss. Marcus studied the simulation. Garrett's house? Right in the worst zone. Dr. Wong highlighted a property near the bottom of the development. 6 feet of water for approximately 26 days. Total loss. The irony was almost funny. Garrett was fighting to destroy the only thing protecting his own investment. Does he know? Marcus asked. I doubt he's run the models. Dr. Wong's expression suggested she had limited patience for developers who ignored hydrology. Men like Garrett see water as an amenity to be controlled for aesthetic purposes. They don't understand it's a force that follows physical laws regardless of property values or development plans. Emma spoke quietly. We need to make sure everyone in Thornton Ridge understands what they're voting to destroy. The emergency HOA meeting happened Saturday evening. Janet Reeves had organized it, using her authority as a longtime member to demand a special session to reconsider the dam removal vote. 120 residents packed the community center. Garrett sat in front with his lawyer, confident and composed. But Janet had prepared well. She opened with financial documentation. I've been reviewing our HOA accounts for the past 5 years. With the help of former treasurer Bear Morrison, I've identified $380,000 in payments to companies that provided no services. She displayed spreadsheets on the projector: Thornton Valley Landscaping, Mountain Ridge Legal, Peak Property Services. All share business addresses with Garrett Thornton's development company. All receive payments for work that volunteers actually performed. Garrett stood up, his voice carrying practiced outrage. "This is a witch hunt. Those were legitimate consulting fees." Janet didn't flinch. "Then you can provide invoices detailing services rendered, timesheets, proof of work performed. Until then, this looks like embezzlement." The room erupted in competing voices. Neighbors who'd trusted Garrett for 9 years facing evidence they'd been systematically robbed. Garrett's supporters demanding proof. The undecided majority trying to process information that rewrote their understanding of their community. Helen Wu stood up, her voice shaking but determined. "I invested $80,000 in Garrett's resort project. My husband's life insurance. Garrett promised guaranteed returns. Now I've learned from other investors in his Utah and Wyoming developments that he has a history of taking money for projects that never get built." Garrett's lawyer tried to interrupt, but Helen continued. "I'm 73 years old. That money was supposed to fund my retirement. Instead, I'm working part-time at the library because I trusted a man who makes a living lying to people like me." The mood in the room shifted. Personal testimony carried weight that spreadsheets couldn't match. This wasn't abstract fraud. This was a neighbor's grandmother working in her 70s because a con man had stolen her future. Diane Thornton had been sitting in back, silent and nearly invisible. Now she walked to the front, her presence drawing complete silence. Everyone knew who she was. Garrett's ex-wife, the woman who disappeared from community events after the divorce 2 years ago. "I was married to Garrett for 19 years. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "I'm breaking a non-disclosure agreement by speaking tonight. He can sue me for everything I have left, which isn't much, but I can't stay silent while he destroys more lives." She pulled documents from her bag. "These are financial records from our marriage. They show a pattern of investment fraud going back 15 years. Failed developments in 3 states. Investors who lost everything while Garrett hid assets in shell companies. He's not a developer. He's a professional con artist who uses real estate as cover." Garrett stood up, his face red with rage. "You vindictive witch! Our divorce agreement prohibits you from disclosing private financial information." Diane met his eyes without flinching. "Sue me. I'd rather be broke and honest than silent while you steal from these people." The room exploded. Neighbors shouting questions. Garrett's lawyer trying to restore order. Janet calling for motions and votes. In the chaos, Marcus saw the careful work of the Women's Coalition paying off. Diane's testimony, Helen's victimhood, Janet's documentation, Patricia Morrison photographing everything for the record. Finally, Janet's voice cut through the noise. "I move. We suspend all payments to Garrett Thornton's companies pending independent audit. All in favor?" The vote was 93-18. Garrett's financial pipeline had just been cut. "I further move we rescind our vote supporting Hayes Dam removal, and instead pass a resolution supporting its preservation as historic infrastructure protecting our community." This vote was closer, 76-39, but it passed. The HOA had reversed its position. Garrett stood in the front of the room, his empire crumbling in real time. His face carried the particular fury of a man who'd always gotten his way through intimidation and manipulation, now facing consequences he couldn't control. "This isn't over," he said, looking directly at Marcus. "You people are making a mistake you'll regret." He left before the meeting concluded. His lawyer followed, already on his phone, presumably arranging damage control. The room buzzed with the particular energy of people who'd just discovered they'd been lied to and had chosen to fight back. Marcus found Janet afterward. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me yet." Janet's expression was serious. "Cornered men are dangerous. Garrett just lost his income stream and his political cover. He's going to get desperate." The next morning brought proof of Janet's warning. County Commissioner Wade Phillips called an emergency commission meeting for Monday afternoon. The agenda listed one item: emergency petition for county seizure of Hayes property under eminent domain for public safety purposes. Victor Reyes called Marcus immediately. "They're trying to bypass the HOA. If the county seizes your property under eminent domain, state protection doesn't matter. They can demolish before we get to the governor." "Can they do that?" If they claim imminent public safety threat, yes. Victor's voice was grim. And Wade Phillips owes Garrett $50,000 in campaign contributions. He'll push this through if he can. The commission meeting is Monday at 3. Our meeting with the governor's office is Monday at 10. Victor paused. If we can get state protection confirmed before the county votes, we stop them. But it's going to be close. Marcus spent Sunday preparing testimony, documentation of the fraudulent inspection, evidence of Garrett's embezzlement, Dr. Wong's flood modeling showing the dam actually prevented disasters, Patricia Morrison's photographs proving the county inspector never properly examined the structure. Emma helped organize everything into presentation folders. Her methodical approach reminded Marcus of Rachel, the same attention to detail that made complex information accessible. Mom would be proud of you, Marcus said, the way you've taken charge of this. Emma looked up from the spreadsheet she was organizing. She's proud of you too. She won't say it yet, but I can tell. How can you tell? Because she donated $10,000 she couldn't afford to save your family's dam. Mom doesn't do that for people she's written off. The observation sat between them, fragile with possibility. Do you think there's a chance? Marcus asked. For me and your mother. Emma's expression was complicated. I think there's a chance for you to become someone she could love again. But Dad, that's not the same as getting back together. Some things break in ways that can't be fixed. They can only be rebuilt into something different. The wisdom in her words came from hard experience. 18 years watching a marriage dissolve, 3 years living with divorced parents. Emma understood brokenness in ways Marcus wished she didn't have to. I'll take that chance, he said, becoming someone worth loving again. The drive to Denver Monday morning took them through dawn light that painted the mountains in shades of gold and amber. Victor met them at the state capitol building, its gold dome gleaming against blue sky. They were early by 40 minutes, nervous energy making patience impossible. The governor's chief of staff met them in a conference room with windows overlooking the city. Margaret Chen, no relation to Rachel, was 52 and had the kind of efficient competence that suggested she ran the actual state government, while elected officials handled the public performance. She reviewed their documentation with the focus of someone trained to find problems. The 1924 letter from Governor Sweet, the evidence of county corruption, Dr. Wong's scientific modeling, Garrett's history of investment fraud. This is compelling. Margaret set down the last folder. But you need to understand what you're asking. If Governor Bradford invokes state protection based on a century-old executive order, she's overriding county authority. That makes political enemies. Marcus had prepared for this. Governor, what we're asking is for the state to protect historic infrastructure from local corruption. That's not controversial. That's basic good governance. Margaret smiled slightly. I like the framing, but good governance often loses to local politics. The conference room door opened. Governor Jennifer Bradford entered, tall and composed, carrying the particular presence of someone comfortable with power. She sat down without preamble. Talk to me about this dam. Marcus told the story. His great-grandfather building it in 1922. His grandfather maintaining it for 60 years. The century of flood protection. Garrett's systematic campaign to destroy it. The fraud and embezzlement funding the attack. Governor Bradford listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, she turned to Margaret. Legal opinion? Margaret pulled out a memo. Governor Sweet's designation is legally valid. It grants state protection that supersedes local ordinances. However, it's discretionary whether current administration honors it. You can invoke it. You can also decline to invoke it. The governor looked at the 1924 letter. William Sweet was my great-grandfather's friend. Both of them believed government existed to protect what individuals couldn't protect alone. That's not a bad principle. She turned to Marcus. But I need to know something. If I invoke state protection, Garrett Thornton will sue. He'll make this a political issue. He'll claim I'm favoring wealthy landowners over community safety. Are you prepared for that fight? Marcus thought about his father dying alone while repairing the dam. About Emma giving him one more chance to prove himself. About Rachel sacrificing her business for truth. About Helen Wu working in her 70s because a con man had stolen her retirement. Governor, I'm fighting to protect 200 families who don't know they need protection. If Garrett wants to make that controversial, let him try. Governor Bradford signed the executive order at 9:47. Modern reaffirmation of Governor Sweet's 1924 designation. Hayes Dam received official state protection and immunity from local ordinances. Marcus called Emma from the Capitol steps. "We did it. The dam has state protection." Her whoop of joy carried through the phone loud enough that Victor smiled. "Now get to that county commission meeting. Make sure Wade Phillips knows he just lost." The Pinewood Valley County Commission chambers were packed when Marcus arrived at 2:30. Every seat filled. People standing along the walls. News cameras in back. Christina Vega from the Denver Post sat front row with a recording device. Wade Phillips called the meeting to order at 3 o'clock sharp. His confidence suggested he didn't know what was coming. "We have one item on the agenda. Emergency petition for county seizure of Hayes property under eminent domain authority. Mr. Thornton, present your case." Garrett stood up with his lawyer. "Commissioners, Hayes Dam represents an imminent public safety threat. Recent structural damage, combined with aging infrastructure, creates unacceptable risk to downstream residents. The county has authority and responsibility to protect public safety through property seizure if necessary." His lawyer presented the same fraudulent inspection report, the same stock photos of dam failures from other states, the same emotional appeals about protecting families. Commissioner Maria Santos interrupted. "Mr. Thornton, I've reviewed the evidence presented today. The inspection report you're citing describes a 1960s concrete dam. Hayes Dam is hand-cut limestone from 1922. The inspector appears to have filed a report about a structure he never properly examined." Garrett's lawyer tried to object, but Santos continued. "I've also reviewed independent structural assessments from licensed engineers. All conclude the dam exceeds modern safety standards. Your claims of danger appear to be fabricated." Commissioner James Liu added his concerns. "I'm troubled by financial evidence showing payments from HOA accounts to your companies. $380,000 over 5 years. That raises serious questions about your motivations in this matter." Wade Phillips tried to regain control. "Commissioners, we can address Mr. Thornton's finances separately. Today, we're focused on public safety." Marcus stood up. "May I address the commission?" Phillips looked annoyed but nodded. "You have 5 minutes." Marcus walked to the front, pulled the governor's executive order from his folder. "Commissioners, this morning, Governor Bradford signed an order granting Hayes Dam state protection under the 1924 designation by Governor William Sweet. This grants immunity from local ordinances and county seizure." He handed copies to each commissioner. Wade Phillips read it with growing horror on his face. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, "I have scientific evidence that Hayes Dam prevents annual flooding of 47 properties in Thornton Ridge. Destroying this infrastructure would cause millions in flood damage during next month's spring melt." He presented Dr. Wong's modeling, the computer simulations, the projected losses, the homes that would be underwater for weeks, including, Marcus pointed to the map, the property owned by Garrett Thornton himself. 6 feet of water for 26 days. Total loss. He's fighting to destroy the only thing protecting his own investment. The room erupted in gasps and angry mutters. Garrett stood up, face red. "That's a lie. Computer models aren't reality." Dr. Wong stood up in the gallery. "I'm Dr. Patricia Wong from Colorado State University. I created those models using 40 years of flow data and current snowpack measurements. The science is sound. Without that dam, Mr. Thornton's property will flood catastrophically next month." Wade Phillips tried one final play. "Regardless of state orders, this commission has responsibility for public safety." Commissioner Santos cut him off. "Wade, we all know Garrett contributed $50,000 to your last campaign. Your conflict of interest is so obvious it's embarrassing. I move we reject this eminent domain petition and instead pass a resolution commending Hayes Dam for a century of flood protection." The vote was 4-1. Only Phillips voted against. Garrett's eminent domain play had failed. Marcus watched Garrett leave the chambers. The developer's movements carried the particular stiffness of a man holding rage barely in check. This wasn't over. Cornered animals were most dangerous. The celebration lasted through the evening, community members congratulating Marcus, news coverage framing it as historic infrastructure protected from local corruption. Christina Vega's article hitting the Denver Post website at 7 p.m. with devastating detail about Garrett's fraud schemes. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Garrett had lost legally, lost politically, lost financially. Men who built empires on lies and intimidation didn't accept defeat gracefully. He was right to worry. Tuesday at 2:47 in the morning, Marcus's phone exploded with alerts. water level sensors showing rapid drop, stress monitors detecting structural movement, emergency automated message in robotic voice, critical breach detected. He called Emma while running to his truck. "Something's wrong at the dam." Her voice was thick with sleep. "What kind of wrong?" "I don't know, get there as fast as you can." The drive through darkness took 7 minutes that felt like hours. Marcus's headlights swept across the property, revealing something that made his heart stop. Fresh explosive charges positioned at key structural points, detonation timer visible in the night, and Garrett Thornton himself standing on the dam with a remote detonator in his hand. His BMW sat on the access road, parked at an angle suggesting haste. The dome light was still on, door hanging open. A man who'd stopped thinking rationally and started acting desperately. Marcus killed his headlights and approached on foot, got close enough to see the timer. 4 minutes, 38 seconds. Close enough to see Garrett's face in the red glow from the countdown display. The expression of a man who'd lost everything and decided to take everyone down with him. Marcus stepped into view. "Garrett, don't do this." Garrett spun around, raising the detonator. "Stay back, I'll blow it right now." "You'll flood your own neighborhood, your own house." "I don't care." Garrett's laugh was wild. "If I can't have this development, nobody gets anything. Let it all flood. Let them see what happens when you oppose progress." Marcus raised his hands, keeping them visible. "There are 47 families downstream, kids sleeping in their beds right now. You're talking about destroying their homes. They chose their side. They listened to you instead of me. This whole valley turned against me." Emma's truck appeared on the access road, headlights sweeping across them. She jumped out, already on her phone with 911. Garrett gestured wildly with the detonator. "Tell her to stay back or I trigger it now." Emma froze, phone to her ear. "Dad?" The timer showed 3 minutes, 18 seconds. Marcus's mind raced through options. Tackle Garrett and risk triggering the detonator. Try to talk him down and hope police arrived in time. Run and let Garrett destroy everything. None of them were good. "Your father lost everything trusting people," Garrett said. His voice carried a bitter edge. "Built this dam to protect neighbors who never appreciated it. Died alone because his own son abandoned him. Is that what you want, Marcus? To die protecting people who hate you?" The accusation hit harder because it was partially true, but Marcus had learned something in the past month. Something his father had known all along. "My father died protecting something that mattered," Marcus said quietly. "That's not failure. That's purpose. You're destroying things for spite. There's a difference." Garrett's hand trembled on the detonator. The timer showed 2 minutes, 44 seconds. Emma's voice carried across the distance. "Mr. Thornton, my grandfather saved Bear Morrison's son from drowning 30 years ago. Danny Morrison has 2 kids now. They exist because my grandfather knew how to read water from maintaining this dam. How many lives has your resort saved?" Garrett turned toward her. Timer at 2 minutes, 16 seconds. Rachel's voice came from the darkness behind Emma. "Garrett, I analyzed your resort plans. The geography doesn't work. The water rights are impossible. Even if you destroyed this dam, your project would fail. All of this is for nothing." She stepped into the light from the construction lamps Marcus had left running. "You're about to commit terrorism for a resort that could never be built." Garrett stared at her. The detonator lowered slightly. Timer at 1 minute, 42 seconds. Patricia Morrison's truck appeared, then Bear's, Janet Reeves's car. Within 90 seconds, a dozen vehicles lined the access road. Community members emerging from their houses when word spread something was happening. They stood in a semicircle around the dam, watching, waiting. The people Tom Hayes had protected for 60 years, finally bearing witness. Wade Phillips's voice boomed across the property. "Garrett, I'm here. You don't have to do this." Even Phillips, Marcus realized, even the corrupt commissioner who'd taken Garrett's money. Some lines couldn't be crossed. Timer at 1 minute, 12 seconds. Garrett looked at the faces surrounding him, his neighbors, his victims, the people he'd lied to and stolen from and manipulated. All of them here. All of them watching him hold a detonator that would destroy their homes along with his own. The timer clicked down. 58 seconds, 57, 56. Emma walked slowly toward Garrett. "Dad, don't." Marcus grabbed for her, but she was already moving. "Mr. Thornton," she said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "I'm 19 years old. My whole life is ahead of me. But I'm standing here because that dam is worth protecting, even if it costs me everything." She stopped 10 feet from Garrett, looked him in the eyes. "Is your revenge worth killing me?" The question hung in the cold night air. Timer at 42 seconds. Garrett's face crumpled. The detonator fell from his hand onto the stone surface. He collapsed to his knees, sobbing. Everything's gone. Everything I worked for. Bear Morrison moved fast for a man of 68. He had Garrett's hands behind his back and secured before the detonator stopped rolling. Emma grabbed the device, hands shaking but determined. Timer at 28 seconds. Marcus ran to the explosive charges. Yanked wires loose with hands made steady by pure terror turned to action. The charges were commercial grade but poorly wired. Rick Thornton's construction accident had apparently included a head injury because the detonation sequence was all wrong. They would never have worked anyway. The realization was almost funny. Garrett's final desperate move had been doomed from the start. Sheriff's deputies arrived with sirens and lights. They took Garrett into custody, read him rights while he sat on the ground mumbling about projects and investments and fairness. A man who'd built everything on lies watching his empire collapse into truth. Marcus found Emma standing at the edge of the dam, looking at the water flowing below. "Are you okay?" She turned to him, tears streaming down her face. "I thought he was going to kill you. Kill all of us." Marcus pulled her into a hug. "You were incredibly brave, incredibly stupid, but brave." Emma laughed through tears. "I learned from watching you. Stupid bravery seems to run in the Hayes family." Rachel approached slowly. That was terrifying. Marcus looked at her over Emma's shoulder. "Thank you for coming." "I got Emma's text." Rachel's voice shook slightly. "I wasn't going to let you face this alone." The three of them stood together as dawn light began touching the eastern peaks. The dam stood whole. The charges were disarmed. Garrett was in custody. The community that had gathered to witness was dispersing into mourning, telling stories about the night they watched a man try to destroy them all and chose mercy instead. Bear Morrison approached as others were leaving. "That man's going to federal prison for a long time. Attempted terrorism, fraud, embezzlement. He'll die behind bars." "Good," Emma said fiercely. But Bear shook his head. "Not good. Necessary. There's a difference. He's destroyed now. Prison won't fix him. Won't restore what he stole. Won't give Helen Wu her retirement back. It's just consequences. There's no victory in that." Marcus understood what Bear was saying. Justice sometimes felt hollow when it came too late to prevent the damage. The sun rose over Pinewood Valley, painting the mountains gold. Spring was coming. The largest melt in 40 years would test his great-grandfather's engineering in ways it had never been tested. But the dam stood ready. Protected by law, maintained by community, defended against those who would destroy it for profit. Marcus looked at the water flowing over century-old stone and felt something he hadn't felt in 15 years. Purpose beyond career, meaning beyond achievement. The quiet satisfaction of protecting what needed protecting, whether anyone noticed or not. His phone buzzed. Message from Christina Vega. Her article about the bombing attempt was already going viral. National news picking it up. The story of a developer who tried to destroy historic infrastructure and the community that stopped him. But Marcus knew the real story was smaller and more profound. A father learning to show up. A daughter learning to forgive. An ex-wife learning whether redemption was possible. A valley learning that some things were worth fighting for. The hard work was just beginning. Spring melt would arrive in 3 weeks. The dam would be tested. The community would need to remain vigilant. Garrett would face trial and probably decades in prison. The stolen money would be partially recovered. Helen Wu would get some of her retirement back. Not all. Never all. But enough to stop working at 73. Emma touched his arm. "Dad, I'm proud of you. For everything. For showing up. For fighting. For not running when it got hard." Marcus felt the weight of those words settle into the places where guilt had lived for so long. "I'm trying to be worthy of that." "You already are," Emma said. "Grandpa would be proud too." They stood together, watching morning light transform the valley. The dam his great-grandfather built. The legacy his grandfather maintained. The responsibility he'd finally learned to embrace. Some things lasted beyond any single lifetime. Some promises echoed across generations. Some work mattered whether anyone was watching or not. That was the lesson Tom Hayes had tried to teach. The truth Marcus had spent 15 years running from. The inheritance that was always more valuable than land or stone. Protection wasn't about power or control. It was about presence. Showing up every day, doing the work that needed doing, maintaining what needed maintaining, protecting what needed protecting, even when nobody noticed, especially when nobody noticed. That was what it meant to be a keeper. 3 days after Garrett's arrest, the National Weather Service issued a forecast that made Marcus's stomach drop. Unseasonable warming trend predicted for late March. Temperatures 15 degrees above normal. Snowpack at 173% of average, all of it positioned to melt faster than any spring in 40 years. Dr. Wong called while Marcus was reading the forecast for the third time. Her voice carried the controlled urgency of a scientist who understood exactly what the numbers meant. Mr. Hayes, have you seen the updated melt projections? I'm looking at them now. The warming starts in 4 days. Peak flow will hit 2 weeks earlier than my original models predicted. She paused, and Marcus could hear computer keys clicking in the background. We're looking at flows approaching 187% of normal. That's the highest rate since 1983. Marcus did the math in his head. The dam had been designed to handle 200% flow when fully intact. The recent repairs were solid, but the mortar was only 3 weeks old. Curing time had been compressed by necessity. They'd tested the structure at 140% during a controlled release, but 187 was beyond anything they'd proven. Will it hold? The question felt childish but necessary. Dr. Wong's answer carried the honesty of someone who dealt in probabilities rather than certainties. The engineering is sound. Your great-grandfather built for scenarios beyond his experience. The repairs are professional grade. But Marcus, nature doesn't respect engineering margins. Water finds weakness. Always. After hanging up, Marcus walked down to the dam. Late afternoon sun painted the valley in long shadows. The pond sat calm and deceptive, giving no hint of the force building in the mountains above. Snow that had accumulated all winter waited in high valleys, ready to transform into thousands of acre-feet of water flowing toward this single point of controlled release. Emma found him standing on the dam wall, watching water flow over the spillway. She'd driven down from Fort Collins the moment she saw the forecast. Her face carried the same concern Marcus felt. Dr. Wong says it could go either way. Marcus nodded. We did everything right, used the best materials, followed great-grandpa's original techniques. But we're about to find out if it was enough. Emma linked her arm through his, a gesture of solidarity that meant more than any words. Whatever happens, we face it together. The first wave of warming hit on Thursday. Temperatures climbed from March cold to May warmth in 36 hours. Marcus could almost hear the snow melting in the high country. Rivers that had run thin and icy all winter began to swell with runoff carrying the accumulated precipitation of an above-average snow year. Rachel arrived Friday evening with monitoring equipment borrowed from her firm. Despite losing the Thornton contract, despite the financial pressures threatening to close her business, she'd invested in sensors that would provide real-time data during the melt. Jessica thinks I'm crazy, Rachel said, setting up wireless monitors along the creek. Spending money we don't have on equipment for a dam that's not our responsibility. But you came anyway. Rachel met his eyes. Some things matter more than business decisions. They worked together as evening shadows stretched across the property, installing water level sensors, positioning cameras to capture flow rates, setting up the monitoring station in Tom's workshop where they could track everything in real time. The cottage felt different with Rachel there. More like a home than a museum to his father's life. Emma noticed it too, watching her parents work together with the easy coordination of people who'd once known each other's rhythms. You two were good together, Emma said quietly when Rachel went to get more equipment from her truck. Before Dad forgot how to be present, Marcus felt the weight of that truth. We were. I hope we can be again. Don't hope. Emma's voice was firm. Prove it. Keep showing up. Keep doing the work. That's what matters. The weekend brought scattered rain that accelerated the melt. Water levels began climbing Sunday afternoon. Not dramatically yet, but steadily. The kind of rise that suggested larger forces gathering strength. Bear Morrison stopped by Sunday evening with Patricia. They'd brought enough food to feed a small army, casseroles and sandwiches and thermoses of coffee. Patricia's organizational skills applied to crisis preparation. You three are going to be watching monitors for the next week, Patricia said, arranging food in Tom's small refrigerator. No point adding hunger to stress. Bear stood at the window, looking toward the dam. Your father weathered 40 springs maintaining that structure. He knew every sound it made, every way water moved through it. That knowledge kept this valley safe. Marcus felt the echo of his father's presence. All those years of daily observation, seasonal adjustments, understanding acquired through patient attention rather than academic study, knowledge that couldn't be downloaded or purchased, only earned through time. I wish he were here, Marcus admitted. He'd know what to expect. He is here. Bear's voice was certain, in every stone placed with precision, in every technique passed down from his father, in the fact that you're standing watch now instead of running back to Denver. Tom's here. Monday morning brought the kind of temperature spike that made meteorologists reach for superlatives. 78 degrees in the mountains, snow melting so fast you could hear it dripping from every tree and rock face, rivers turning from clear to brown as they carried the accumulated sediment of winter downstream. Marcus sat in the workshop with Emma and Rachel, watching water levels climb on computer monitors, flow rates increasing by the hour, the dam handling it all with the steady competence his great-grandfather had engineered into limestone and mortar a century ago. Dr. Wong video called at noon with updated projections. Her face on the laptop screen showed the particular focus of someone watching a natural experiment unfold. You're currently at 138% of normal flow. The rate of increase suggests you'll hit 187% by Wednesday morning. That's 2 days. 2 days to prepare for the highest flow rates the dam had faced in decades. 2 days to shore up monitoring. 2 days to warn downstream residents that if something went wrong, they'd have less than an hour to evacuate. Janet Reeves organized the warning system with the efficiency of a retired teacher managing a field trip. Phone trees, emergency text alerts, evacuation routes mapped and distributed. She turned crisis preparation into a community project that reminded everyone what they were protecting and why it mattered. Helen Wu volunteered to coordinate supplies for the volunteer monitoring teams. Despite being 73, despite losing her retirement to Garrett's fraud, she showed up with energy that shamed people 40 years younger. Someone asked why she cared so much about a dam that had almost been destroyed. Because Tom Hayes protected us for 60 years and never asked for anything, Helen said simply. Now it's our turn to protect what he built. Tuesday brought rain mixed with snowmelt, the kind of weather that turned every creek into a torrent and every drainage into a temporary river. Water everywhere, moving fast, carrying the mountain's winter burden toward the valley. Marcus stood on the dam at 3 in the afternoon, feeling vibration through the stone. Not concerning yet, just the natural resonance of massive water pressure against solid engineering. But it reminded him that forces were building, nature gathering strength for the final test. Rachel joined him, both of them watching brown water surge over the spillway, the carefully designed overflow doing exactly what it was meant to do, releasing pressure in controlled increments rather than catastrophic surges. Your great-grandfather was a genius, Rachel said. Look how the water spreads across these stepped stones. It's dissipating energy before it hits downstream. Modern engineers would use concrete baffles and get half the efficiency. Marcus felt pride in ancestry he'd spent years trying to escape, all because he paid attention, watched how water moved naturally and worked with it instead of against it. That's something you're learning too. Rachel's voice was soft. How to work with what is, instead of trying to control everything into what you think it should be. The observation applied to more than engineering. Marcus understood she was talking about their relationship, about fatherhood, about all the ways he tried to force life into shapes that served his ambition, rather than accepting the natural flow of presence and partnership. I'm learning, he said, slowly, but I'm learning. Wednesday morning arrived with the kind of atmospheric pressure that made weather forecasts irrelevant. You could feel the storm building, smell it in air that carried electricity and moisture and the promise of transformation. The monitors showed flow rates climbing past 160% at dawn, 170 at 9 a.m., 175 by 11, the curve on the graph steepening as melt accelerated in the high country. Emma plotted the data on a whiteboard, her mathematical training turning numbers into visual story. If this rate continues, we hit 187% around 2 p.m. Marcus checked structural sensors for the 100th time. Stress levels within tolerances but climbing, the repaired sections bearing load as designed, but showing the strain of forces they'd never faced before. Dr. Wong's graduate students arrived at noon, turning the property into a field laboratory, cameras recording from multiple angles, sensors measuring everything from water temperature to sediment load to the acoustic signature of flow over limestone. One of the students, a young man named David, with the intense focus of someone writing a thesis, approached Marcus with a question. Mr. Hayes, how does it feel knowing the next few hours will prove or disprove a century of engineering? Terrifying, Marcus admitted. My great-grandfather built this based on observation and intuition. No computers, no advanced materials, just stone and knowledge and faith that if you respected how water moved, it would respect your structures. And now we find out if he was right. Marcus looked at the dam standing solid against rising pressure. Now we find out if faith and knowledge are enough. 1 p.m. brought flow rates past 180%. The dam's voice changed. Not concerning yet, just different. A deeper tone as water volume increased. The sound of forces approaching limits. Rachel stood beside Marcus in the workshop, both of them watching monitors that displayed real-time data from a dozen sensors. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining in a gesture that spoke of shared tension and the comfort of not facing crisis alone. Emma noticed and said nothing, just smiled slightly and returned to her calculations. The community began arriving around 1:30, people parking along the access road and walking down to witness what happened next. Not crowding the dam, respecting the danger, but present. The valley showing up for the structure that had protected it for a century. Bear Morrison stood with a group of older residents, men who remembered previous spring melts and knew what normal looked like. This wasn't normal. This was the kind of flow that tested everything. Patricia Morrison organized the observers with nurse efficiency, keeping people at safe distance, making sure everyone knew evacuation routes if things went wrong, preparing for disaster while hoping for survival. Janet Reeves stood beside Helen Wu, both women representing different aspects of what the dam meant. Janet, the community organizer who'd helped expose Garrett's fraud. Helen, the victim who'd chosen to support protection rather than seek revenge. At 1:45, flow rates hit 185%. The dam vibrated under Marcus's feet, not shaking, just resonating with the forces moving through and around it. A living thing responding to pressure. Emma's voice cut through the tension. Dr. Wong says peak flow should hit in the next 20 minutes based on upstream measurements. 20 minutes to find out if 3 weeks of emergency repairs could withstand forces that occurred once every 40 years. 20 minutes to discover whether his great-grandfather's century-old engineering would prove superior to modern techniques. 20 minutes to learn if Marcus Hayes could protect what his father had maintained and his grandfather had built. The monitors showed stress levels climbing, repaired sections at 92% of tested capacity, still within margins, but approaching the edge of proven performance. Beyond this point, they were trusting in materials and techniques that had never faced these exact conditions. Rachel squeezed his hand. Whatever happens, you did everything right. Marcus appreciated the support, but knew that doing everything right didn't guarantee success. Sometimes nature won regardless of human effort. Sometimes the forces were too large and the structures too small, and all the careful preparation amounted to nothing against the indifferent power of physics. 2 p.m. arrived with flow rates touching 187%, the predicted maximum. Water surging over the spillway in brown torrents that carried the accumulated winter of the high country. The sound was overwhelming, a continuous roar that made conversation difficult. But the dam held. Stress sensors showed the repaired sections flexing under load, but maintaining integrity. The mortar that had cured for only 3 weeks performing like material decades old. The techniques Marcus had learned from his father's journals, proving as sound as the original construction. Emma checked calculations against real-time data. It's holding. All sections within tolerance. The repairs are working. The crowd along the access road erupted in cheers. People who'd spent weeks uncertain whether this structure would survive, now watching it perform exactly as designed. A century of engineering proving superior to modern doubts. But Marcus knew better than to celebrate yet. Peak flow wasn't a moment, it was a period. The dam needed to hold not just for minutes, but for hours, as the maximum runoff worked its way through the system. Dr. Wong's voice came through the laptop speakers. Mr. Hayes, I'm seeing flow rates plateau. You should maintain current levels for approximately 4 to 6 hours before beginning decline. 6 hours at maximum stress. 6 hours trusting that every stone was properly placed, every mortar joint fully cured, every structural element performing as designed. Rachel moved to the coffee maker, brewing fresh fuel for the long watch ahead. Emma updated the whiteboard with projected timeline. Marcus stood at the window, watching water flow with forces that would have destroyed lesser structures. The afternoon stretched into evening, flow rates holding steady at 186 to 188%. Minor fluctuations, but nothing that suggested system failure. The dam singing its deep note of stressed stone bearing massive loads with century-old competence. Bear brought food around 5 p.m. Sandwiches nobody felt like eating, but consumed anyway because crisis demanded fuel. Patricia organized shift schedules for overnight monitoring. The community settling in for vigil. As sunset painted the mountains in amber and gold, Marcus realized they'd been at maximum flow for 3 hours. 3 hours of the dam performing flawlessly. 3 hours of his great-grandfather's engineering proving itself against the largest test in 4 decades. Emma fell asleep on the workshop couch around 8 p.m., exhausted from 2 days of constant monitoring. Rachel covered her with Tom's old fishing jacket, the gesture carrying maternal tenderness that made Marcus's chest tight. "They're going to make it," Rachel said quietly. "The dam and your daughter both." Marcus understood she was talking about more than structures and spring melt. She was talking about healing, about Emma's journey from anger to forgiveness, about the family they might rebuild from the fragments of what they'd broken. "I hope so," Marcus said. "Both of them." They stood watch together through the night, taking turns monitoring sensors while the other dozed fitfully, the kind of partnership that came from shared purpose rather than romantic reunion. 2 people working toward the same goal, trusting each other to carry the weight when needed. Midnight brought flow rates still holding at 187%. The dam's voice unchanged, that deep resonance of stress limestone-bearing loads that would have seemed impossible to engineers who didn't understand how observation and intuition could surpass calculation. Dawn arrived cold and clear, flow rates beginning to drop as the initial surge worked through the system. 185% at 6 a.m., 182 by 7, the curve turning downward as nature exhausted its first fury. Emma woke to find her parents asleep in chairs, monitors still running, coffee cold in abandoned cups. She took a moment to photograph them, these 2 people who'd loved each other once and broken each other, and might be learning to build something new from the wreckage. Then she updated the whiteboard with overnight data and made fresh coffee, practical needs taking priority over sentiment. By noon Thursday, flow rates had dropped to 165%, still high but clearly declining. The dam had survived peak melt. Not just survived, but excelled, performing with margins that suggested it could have handled even higher flows if necessary. Dr. Wong arrived in person at 2 p.m., bringing her entire graduate student team to document what they were calling the Hayes Dam Validation Event. A century-old structure outperforming modern predictions, proving that engineering based on observation could equal or surpass techniques dependent on computation. "This is going in textbooks," Dr. Wong said, watching water flow over limestone that showed no signs of stress or damage. "Your great-grandfather built something that shouldn't work according to modern theory. No computer modeling, no advanced materials, just stone and mortar and understanding. And it works better than structures we build today with every advantage." Marcus felt pride mixing with humility. He wasn't special, hadn't contributed anything except the willingness to preserve what his ancestors had created. But sometimes preservation was enough. Sometimes the highest achievement was recognizing when not to improve, not to modernize, not to replace what already worked perfectly. The community celebration happened Saturday evening after flow rates had declined to manageable levels and the immediate crisis had passed. 200 people gathered at the dam for what Janet Reeves had organized as a centennial appreciation ceremony. Only it wasn't quite the centennial yet. The dam had been built in 1922. But Janet argued that surviving the largest melt in 40 years deserved recognition regardless of calendar precision. Bear Morrison spoke first, his retired fire chief's authority lending weight to the moment. 102 years ago, Thomas Hayes Sr. built this dam with hand tools and determination. For a century, it's protected our valley without asking for recognition or payment. This week, it proved that old knowledge still works, that careful observation beats hasty modernization, that some things are built to last. He turned to Marcus. Tom Hayes Jr. maintained this structure for 60 years. He died doing the work because he understood responsibility doesn't retire. And now his son has learned what Tom spent a lifetime trying to teach. That presence matters more than prestige. That protection is its own reward. Helen Wu spoke next, her 73 years evident in her voice, but not her spirit. I lost my retirement to a con man who wanted to destroy this dam. I'm working at the library because I trusted the wrong person. But I don't regret helping save this structure. Because Tom Hayes protected us for 6 decades and never asked for thanks. Protecting what he built is the least I can do. Patricia Morrison added her piece. I'm a nurse. I spent 30 years in emergency rooms making life and death decisions. I learned that the best medicine is often prevention. Tom Hayes prevented disasters for longer than I've been alive. This dam is preventive medicine for our entire valley. Emma spoke last, surprising Marcus, who hadn't known she'd prepared remarks. My grandfather died maintaining this dam because he believed some responsibilities matter more than personal comfort. My father spent 15 years running from that belief, running from small-town life and quiet duty, and the kind of success that doesn't come with awards or recognition. She looked at Marcus. But he came back. He learned what Grandpa tried to teach him. And this week, he proved it. Not by building something new, but by protecting something old. Not by seeking glory, but by showing up every day to do the work nobody notices until it's not done. The crowd applauded. Marcus felt the weight of public recognition and understood why his father had avoided it. This wasn't about validation, wasn't about proving worth or earning respect. It was about maintaining what needed maintaining whether anyone was watching or not. After the ceremony, people drifted back to their homes. The crisis had passed. Life returned to normal rhythms. But something had changed in the valley. A recognition that protection required vigilance, that infrastructure needed maintenance, that the price of safety was eternal attention to the structures that provided it. Rachel found Marcus sitting on the dam wall after everyone had left. The moon was rising over eastern peaks, painting the pond in silver light. Water flowed with the steady voice of forces returning to equilibrium. You did good, she said. Really good. We did good. Marcus gestured to encompass the week of monitoring, the community support, the collective effort that had seen them through crisis. I couldn't have done this alone. That's what Tom understood. Rachel sat beside him, close but not touching. Protection isn't solo work. It takes community, partnership, people showing up for each other. The observation carried implications beyond dam maintenance. Marcus understood she was describing what their marriage had lacked: his solo approach to life, his inability to accept partnership, his assumption that he could handle everything alone and that asking for help was weakness. I'm learning, he said. Finally learning. I know, Rachel's voice was soft. I see it. Emma sees it. The whole valley sees it. Does that mean there's a chance? The question felt vulnerable but necessary. For us? Rachel was quiet for a long moment. The sound of water filled the silence. When she spoke, her words carried the careful precision of someone who'd thought deeply about complicated questions. I think there's a chance for you to become someone I could build a new relationship with. Not go back to what we had. That's broken beyond repair. But maybe build something different, something better, based on who you're becoming rather than who you were. Marcus felt hope mixed with realism. That's all I can ask for. They sat together in moonlight, two people who'd loved and hurt each other learning whether healing was possible. The dam flowed beside them, stone and water in conversation that had lasted a century. Some things endured, some things could be rebuilt. Some foundations were strong enough to support new structures if you were willing to do the work. Garrett's trial happened in federal court 6 weeks later. Marcus attended, not for revenge, but for closure. The courtroom in Denver held 50 spectators, mostly investors who'd lost money to Garrett's various schemes over the years. The prosecution presented evidence with clinical precision: the embezzlement from Thornton Ridge HOA, the investment fraud spanning 3 states, the attempted destruction of federal infrastructure, the bombing attempt that elevated charges from financial crimes to terrorism. Garrett's lawyer mounted a defense based on mental breakdown and financial desperation, argued that his client had snapped under pressure, that the bombing attempt was aberration rather than pattern. The prosecution countered with testimony from Diane Thornton, who described 19 years of systematic lying and manipulation, with evidence from previous investors who'd been defrauded in Utah and Wyoming, with documentation showing Garrett had been planning the dam's destruction for 5 years, long before any claimed mental breakdown. Helen Wu testified about her stolen retirement. Janet Reeves about the community funds diverted to shell companies. Bear Morrison about the systematic corruption of local officials through campaign contributions. Marcus testified about the fraudulent inspection, the sabotage, the bombing attempt. His engineer's precision turning events into timeline and evidence into irrefutable pattern. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, returned verdicts of guilty on all counts. Federal Judge Patricia Morrison, no relation to Bear, delivered sentencing that reflected the scope and duration of Garrett's crimes. 22 years federal prison for the financial crimes, 5 additional years for attempted destruction of infrastructure, 3 more for the terrorism charges related to the bombing attempt. Sentences to run consecutively rather than concurrently. 30 years total. Garrett was 54. He'd be 84 if he served the full term. Likely would die in prison given actuarial tables and the stress of incarceration. As marshals led him away, Garrett looked at Marcus one final time. His expression carried no remorse, just the bitter recognition of someone who'd gambled everything and lost. Outside the courthouse, Helen Wu approached Marcus with news delivered in the matter-of-fact tone of someone who'd learned not to expect miracles. The federal recovery effort got back about 38% of what Garrett stole. After legal fees and administrative costs, I'll receive approximately $27,000. That's not enough, Marcus said. No. But it's something. Helen managed to smile. I can stop working at the library. Not retire completely, but reduce hours. At 73, that's worth a lot. Diane Thornton stood nearby, speaking quietly with her lawyer about the lawsuit Garrett had threatened for her NDA violation. The lawyer was explaining that convicted felons couldn't sue from prison for civil matters related to their crimes. You're free, the lawyer said. He can't touch you anymore. Diane's expression showed relief mixed with the particular exhaustion of someone who'd carried fear for too long. Freedom felt strange after years of silence and compliance. The drive back to Pinewood Valley took Marcus through afternoon light that painted the plains in gold. He thought about justice and how it rarely felt complete, about victims who got partial restitution and perpetrators who faced consequences that couldn't undo damage, about the fact that winning still left scars that would take years to heal. Emma called as he passed the mountain towns. Mom told me about the verdict. 30 years. He'll die in prison. Good. Emma's voice was fierce. He tried to kill you, tried to destroy Grandpa's legacy, stole from people like Helen Wu. He deserves every year. Marcus understood her anger, but had learned something about revenge over the past months. Justice isn't about what people deserve. It's about preventing future harm. Garrett can't hurt anyone else now. That's what matters. The wisdom in his own words surprised him. When had he become the kind of man who thought about prevention rather than punishment? Who measured success by protection rather than revenge? Maybe around the time he learned what his father had been trying to teach him all along. Summer arrived with the particular intensity of mountain seasons that compress full experience into abbreviated time. The pond returned to normal levels. The repaired sections of the dam showed no stress from their trial by flood. Dr. Wong published a paper about Hayes Dam that brought engineering students from 3 universities to study 19th century techniques that outperformed modern methods. Marcus's consulting practice grew beyond expectations. Municipalities across Colorado hired him to assess aging infrastructure, teach observation-based maintenance, preserve structures that worked rather than replacing them with expensive modern alternatives. He was making less money than his Denver job had paid, but felt richer in ways that didn't show on tax returns. Emma spent her summer working with Dr. Wong's research team, earning credits toward her environmental engineering degree while living in her grandfather's cottage. She and Marcus fell into rhythms of shared meals and evening walks, the kind of casual proximity that rebuilt relationships better than forced conversations. Rachel's firm survived despite the loss of the Thornton contract. Her honest environmental assessment of Hayes Dam brought other clients who valued integrity over convenient conclusions. She and Jessica were rebuilding on a foundation of ethics that had nearly bankrupted them, but ultimately proved marketable to developers who wanted genuine analysis rather than rubber stamps. On a Thursday evening in late July, Rachel drove down from Denver for what had become weekly dinner at the cottage. Marcus cooked. Emma provided commentary. Rachel brought wine. They ate on the porch overlooking the dam and talked about everything except the question that hovered unspoken between the adults. After Emma went inside to study, Rachel and Marcus sat in twilight watching bats hunt insects over the pond. The comfortable silence of people who'd learned they didn't need to fill every moment with words. "I've been thinking," Rachel said finally, "about what comes next, for us." Marcus waited, understanding this was her timeline, not his. "I'm not ready to remarry. Maybe never will be. Too much history, too much hurt." "I understand. But I'd like to try dating. Actual dating. Not just being civil for Emma's sake or working together on dam preservation. Real effort to see if there's anything worth building." Marcus felt hope kindle carefully. "I'd like that. It won't be easy." Rachel's voice carried the realism of experience. "We have patterns, bad habits, history that doesn't just disappear because we want it to." "I know, but I'm willing to do the work." "That's what's different." Rachel turned to look at him directly. "Before, you said you'd do the work but never actually did it. Now you show up. Consistently. That's worth trying." They sat in growing darkness, two people who'd failed at marriage the first time, learning whether they were capable of building something better from the lessons of that failure. The dam flowed beside them, water and stone in partnership that had lasted a century, because someone had understood how to work with natural forces, rather than against them. Maybe relationships were the same. Maybe the key wasn't controlling or forcing or trying to make things fit preconceived shapes. Maybe it was observing, adapting, working with what was rather than insisting on what should be. Marcus was learning, slowly, but learning. And for the first time in 15 years, that felt like enough. 6 months after the spring melt tested and validated a century of engineering, Marcus stood in the workshop that had been his father's domain for 60 years. November light slanted through windows that looked toward the dam, painting everything in amber and gold. The smell of coffee mixed with the particular scent of old wood and stored tools. The accumulated atmosphere of a life spent in quiet service. Emma sat at the workbench, her laptop open beside her grandfather's final journal. She was writing her master's thesis on historic watershed management, using Hayes Dam as the primary case study. Dr. Wong had secured funding from the Colorado Water Conservation Board, money that would support Emma's research for 2 years and provide stipend enough to live on. "Dad, listen to this." Emma read from a journal entry dated March 1997. "Today marks 75 years since my father built this dam. I've maintained it for 43 of those years. Sometimes I wonder what he'd think of the changes I've made. The improved drainage system in 1982, the reinforced spillway in 1991. Then I remember what he told me when I was young. The dam isn't a monument to one man's vision. It's a living system that adapts while maintaining purpose. Change what needs changing. Preserve what works. That's the only rule that matters." Marcus felt the familiar ache of his father's wisdom, arriving too late to prevent regret, but early enough to inform the future. That's exactly what he did. Adapted without abandoning principle. "It's what you're doing too." Emma closed the laptop. "Your consulting practice isn't about preserving every old structure. It's about teaching people to distinguish between what works and what's just old, between heritage worth protecting and nostalgia worth releasing." The distinction mattered. Marcus had learned over the past months that preservation wasn't about freezing time. It was about maintaining function. Some old structures deserved replacement. Some new methods improved on traditional techniques. The skill was knowing which was which. His phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Reminder, meeting with Governor Bradford's office at 2 p.m. Don't be late." The meeting concerned the dam's official centennial celebration, scheduled for the following spring. Governor Bradford had committed state resources to honoring Hayes Dam as historic infrastructure, using it as model for preservation programs across Colorado. The publicity would be significant. Marcus felt ambivalent about it. "I don't want this to become a circus," he told Emma. "Grandpa maintained the dam in obscurity for 60 years. Turning it into a media event feels wrong." Emma's response carried the pragmatic wisdom of someone who understood both sentiment and strategy. Grandpa had the luxury of obscurity because the dam worked and nobody questioned it. You don't have that luxury anymore. Garrett tried to destroy it. Others will try again if they think they can get away with it. Public recognition creates protection. She was right, of course. Visibility had costs, but also benefits. State designation, federal protection, educational programs that would teach the next generation why some infrastructure deserved preservation. None of that happened in silence. The drive to Denver took Marcus through landscape transformed by autumn, aspens turning gold in high valleys, the particular clarity of air that came with shorter days and longer shadows. He'd made this drive hundreds of times over the past 6 months, sometimes for business, sometimes to see Rachel. The distinction between the two had blurred in comfortable ways. Rachel met him in the coffee shop across from the state capitol building. She'd started arriving early to their meetings, using the time to work on reports or return phone calls. Efficient use of transition moments, a habit he'd learned from watching her rebuild her business through careful attention to details others overlooked. "How's the Jensen assessment going?" Marcus asked, settling into the chair across from her. "Complicated." Rachel's firm had been hired to evaluate dam infrastructure in Summit County. The client wanted rubber stamp approval. "We found significant structural issues that need addressing before winter. They're not happy about the cost or timeline." "Are they asking you to modify conclusions?" "Strongly suggesting it would be beneficial to their project timeline." Rachel's smile was wry. "I explained that Chen and Associates doesn't do beneficial modifications to structural engineering assessments. They can accept our findings or hire someone else. And risk that someone else finding the same problems?" Exactly. Rachel's reputation for integrity had become her competitive advantage. Developers who wanted genuine analysis rather than convenient conclusions sought her out. Those looking for rubber stamps went elsewhere. Her firm was smaller than it had been before the Garrett debacle, but more profitable and infinitely more respected. The meeting with Governor Bradford's chief of staff covered logistics for the centennial celebration. Timing, attendees, media coverage, educational components. Margaret Chen had a gift for turning ceremonial events into strategic opportunities. "We're proposing a week-long series of events," Margaret explained, displaying a timeline on her tablet. "Monday through Friday next April. Engineering students touring the dam. Workshops on preservation techniques. A symposium on balancing modern needs with historic infrastructure. Then Saturday, the main celebration and dedication of the historical marker." Marcus reviewed the schedule with growing appreciation for the scope. "This is more than I expected." Governor Bradford sees this as launching pad for statewide infrastructure preservation initiative. Margaret's political instincts showed in how she framed everything around policy outcomes rather than ceremonial recognition. "Your dam proves that proper maintenance extends lifespan and reduces long-term costs. That's a message every municipality needs to hear." After the meeting, Marcus and Rachel walked through downtown Denver's lunch crowd. Office workers hurrying between buildings, food trucks dispensing quick meals, the machinery of urban life grinding forward with the efficiency of systems most people never questioned until they failed. "Do you miss it?" Rachel asked. "The city life, the corporate career?" Marcus considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. Clear metrics for success, predictable advancement, the illusion that achievement could be measured in salary and titles. But I was measuring the wrong things, optimizing for outcomes that didn't actually matter." He gestured at the crowds around them, all these people working hard to get ahead. But ahead of what? Toward what? Most of them probably don't know. I didn't. And now you do? Now I know that presence matters more than position. That protecting what works beats chasing what's new. That showing up every day for something meaningful beats occasional brilliance for something forgettable. Rachel linked her arm through his. "There's the man I married. Took 15 years and a near-death experience with explosives, but he finally showed up." They had dinner that evening at a small Italian restaurant in Capitol Hill. The kind of place with checked tablecloths and wine served in tumblers and pasta, made by someone's grandmother in a kitchen barely visible through the service window. Authentic in ways that couldn't be manufactured or scaled. Over tiramisu and coffee, Rachel raised the subject they'd been circling for months. "I've been thinking about the future. Our future specifically." Marcus set down his fork, giving her complete attention. "This dating thing has worked better than I expected," Rachel continued. "You've been consistent, present, actually showing up when you say you will, following through on commitments, all the things that were missing before." "I'm trying." "I know, and that's what makes this possible." She paused, gathering words for something important. "I'm not ready to remarry. Might never be. Too much history, too many ways the first marriage failed." "I understand. But I'd like to try living together again. Not in Denver. Not in some new place where we're pretending the past didn't happen. At the cottage, where your father lived, where the work is that you're actually committed to. Marcus felt hope mixed with caution. You'd move to Pinewood Valley? My firm can operate from anywhere. Most of my work is site visits anyway. Jessica can handle the Denver office. Rachel's voice carried the certainty of someone who'd thought this through completely. I want to be where you are. Not because I'm following you, but because I want to be part of what you're building. The distinction mattered. Partnership rather than sacrifice. Choice rather than obligation. Two people building something together instead of one person abandoning their life to support another's. I'd like that, Marcus said. Very much. They drove back to Pinewood Valley that night, arriving near midnight. The cottage was dark and cold. Marcus built a fire while Rachel made tea. They sat on the couch watching flames dance, talking about logistics and timelines and the practical details of merging lives that had been separate for 3 years. Emma called the next morning with news that shifted everything into higher gear. Dad, I got the National Science Foundation grant, full funding for 3 years. They want to expand the Hayes Dam study into a comprehensive analysis of pre-modern infrastructure across the Mountain West. Marcus felt pride surge through him. That's incredible. There's more. The grant includes funding for a permanent research station here at the property. They want to build a small facility for visiting researchers and graduate students, make Hayes Dam into a living laboratory. The implications crystallized immediately. The property would become more than family heritage. It would be an educational resource, a training ground for the next generation of engineers, a testament to the idea that old knowledge still had value in modern world. What do you need from me? Marcus asked. Permission to use the land. Emma's voice carried careful respect for the decision's weight. And probably your help designing the facility. It needs to complement the historic site without overwhelming it. Of course, whatever you need. After hanging up, Marcus walked down to the dam. Morning frost painted the grass white. His breath plumed in cold air. Water flowed with the steady voice that had sustained this valley for over a century. He thought about his great-grandfather standing on the same spot in 1922, imagining the structure he would build with hand tools and determination. About his grandfather maintaining it through economic depression and world wars, and the accumulated challenges of 6 decades. About his father dying here, while performing maintenance that protected people who never knew his name. Now Emma would bring the next generation, students who would learn from this dam and carry those lessons to their own projects, engineers who would understand that observation sometimes taught more than computation, that working with natural forces beat trying to control them. The legacy wasn't just stone and water anymore. It was knowledge passing from generation to generation, understanding that some things mattered beyond any individual lifetime. Winter arrived with the particular intensity of mountain seasons compressed into abbreviated windows. Snow fell heavy in December. Marcus and Rachel settled into rhythms of shared life that felt both familiar and new. Morning coffee watching dawn light touch the peaks. Evening meals discussing the day's work. Quiet hours reading while fire crackled and wind howled outside. Emma spent Christmas with them, bringing a tree she'd cut herself from the national forest land above the property. They decorated it with ornaments that had belonged to Tom, each one carrying memory of Christmases past. Rachel made her mother's traditional dumplings. Marcus attempted his father's wassail recipe with mixed results. Emma documented everything on her phone with the determination of someone collecting data for future remembering. This feels right, Emma said on Christmas evening, the 3 of them on the couch watching firelight play across walls. Like we're finally the family we were supposed to be. Better late than never, Rachel said softly. Marcus said nothing, just pulled both of them closer. Some moments didn't need words. Some peace was too fragile to examine with language. Sometimes you just accepted grace when it arrived and didn't question why it had taken so long. New Year brought planning for the centennial celebration. Committee meetings with Janet Reeves and Bear Morrison. Coordination with Dr. Wong's research team. Design reviews for Emma's research station. The cottage became headquarters for organizing an event that was growing beyond original scope. Patricia Morrison volunteered to coordinate community involvement. Helen Wu offered to manage historical documentation. Diane Thornton, who'd moved back to Pinewood Valley after Garrett's conviction freed her from fear of running into him, contributed archival research about the dam's early years. The women who'd formed secret alliance to fight Garrett's corruption had become open partnership to celebrate what they'd saved. Their meetings now happened in Janet's living room with coffee and cookies, instead of in Diane's apartment with documents and evidence. But the same fierce determination remained. "We're not just celebrating a dam," Janet said during one planning session. "We're celebrating the idea that communities can protect what matters when they work together." Bear Morrison added his perspective. "And we're honoring Tom Hayes and his father, men who did the work nobody noticed for longer than most people live. That deserves recognition." The historical markers text went through 7 revisions before everyone agreed on language that balanced technical accuracy with emotional resonance. The final version read, "Hayes Dam, built 1922 by Thomas Hayes Sr., maintained 1924 to 1984 by Thomas Hayes Sr., 1984 to 2024 by Thomas Hayes Jr., protected by the people of Pinewood Valley from 2024 forward." This structure represents more than engineering achievement. It embodies the principle that some responsibilities transcend individual lifetimes, that presence matters more than recognition, that protecting what works beats chasing what's new. May it serve our community for another century. March brought the kind of weather that made celebration planning nervous. Late season snow followed by rapid warming, rivers running high with melt, reminders that nature didn't coordinate with human schedules. But April arrived with perfect clarity, blue skies and moderate temperatures, and the particular quality of light that made the Rockies look like they'd been painted by someone with unlimited access to golden amber and every shade of green that existed. The Centennial Week began Monday with engineering students from 5 universities touring the dam. Dr. Wong led technical discussions about observation-based design principles. Marcus demonstrated maintenance techniques his father had taught him. Emma presented preliminary findings from her research about how 19th century engineering often outperformed modern equivalents. Tuesday through Thursday brought workshops that filled the community center beyond capacity. Structural engineers learning to assess historic infrastructure. Municipal officials discovering that proper maintenance costs less than premature replacement. Environmental consultants understanding that natural systems often worked better than engineered alternatives. Rachel presented a session on ethical consulting practices, using her experience with Garrett as case study in what happened when professionals prioritize client satisfaction over accurate analysis. The room was packed. People took notes like they were hearing revolutionary concepts rather than basic professional ethics. "Funny how integrity seems radical," Rachel said afterward, "when it should just be baseline expectation." Friday's symposium brought together academics and practitioners to discuss preservation philosophy. When to maintain, when to replace, how to distinguish between valuable heritage and outdated obsolescence. The conversations were vigorous and occasionally contentious. Progress required disagreement and debate. Easy consensus usually meant nobody was thinking carefully. Saturday arrived with the kind of weather that made people believe in providence. 72 degrees, light breeze, clouds providing photogenic backdrop without threatening rain. 300 people gathered at the dam by 10 a.m., more than had attended any single event in Pinewood Valley's history. Governor Bradford arrived at 11, her presence lending official weight to the celebration. She spoke with the practiced ease of someone comfortable with public performance, but genuine enough to transcend mere politics. 102 years ago, Thomas Hayes Sr. built this dam with hand tools, determination, and understanding that came from observing how water actually moved through landscape. He didn't have computers or advanced materials or engineering degrees. He had attention, patience, willingness to work with natural forces rather than against them. For a century, this structure has protected our valley through economic depression and world wars, through droughts and floods, through changes in technology and population, and everything else that makes the 21st century unrecognizable to 1922. It survived because Thomas Hayes Jr. maintained it with the same dedication his father brought to building it, because Marcus Hayes fought to preserve it when corruption tried to destroy it, because this community chose protection over convenience. The governor paused, letting her next words carry full weight, but most importantly, it survived because the work was never about the people doing it. It was about the people being protected. 200 families living in this valley have been safe for a century because 3 generations of one family understood that some responsibilities matter more than recognition. Bear Morrison spoke next, his retired fire chief's authority carrying across the assembled crowd. I've lived in this valley 68 years. I've watched Tom Hayes maintain this dam through every one of those years. Never complained, never sought thanks, just did the work every single day, whether anyone was watching or not. My son is alive because Tom understood how water moved in this creek. Danny was 8 years old when he fell in during spring runoff. Current was vicious. Most men would have panicked. Tom knew exactly where to position himself, pulled Danny out and saved his life. Bear's voice thickened with emotion. That knowledge came from decades of daily observation. From showing up every morning to check water levels and flow patterns and all the details that seem insignificant until they're the difference between life and death. Tom Hayes was rich in ways that don't show on tax returns. Rich in purpose, rich in service, rich in legacy that will outlast any corporate achievement. Helen Wu approached the microphone with the careful steps of someone whose 73 years had taught caution, but not timidity. I lost my retirement to a con man who wanted to destroy this dam. I'm still working because I trusted the wrong person, but I don't regret helping save this structure. She looked at the assembled crowd. Tom Hayes protected us for 6 decades without asking for anything in return. The least I could do was protect what he built. That's what community means, taking care of what takes care of us. Emma spoke last, surprising Marcus, who hadn't known she'd prepared remarks. My grandfather died maintaining this dam. He was 68 years old, his heart was failing. He could have retired, relaxed, enjoyed his final years. But he kept working because he understood responsibility doesn't retire. My father spent 15 years running from that understanding. Running from small-town life and quiet service, and the kind of success that doesn't come with awards or promotions. He thought bigger was better, that achievement required recognition, that presence was less valuable than prestige. Emma's voice carried across the silent crowd, but he came back, learned what Grandpa tried to teach him. And this past year, he's shown me what real success looks like. It's not corner offices or impressive titles. It's showing up every day for something that matters. It's protecting what needs protecting, whether anyone notices or not. She turned to Marcus. Dad, you became the man Grandpa always knew you could be. I'm proud of you. He would be too. The crowd applauded. Marcus felt Emma's words settle into places where guilt and regret had lived for too long. Acceptance couldn't erase the lost years, couldn't change the fact that he'd missed his father's final decade. But it could transform regret into motivation, could turn past failures into future commitment. Governor Bradford unveiled the historical marker with Marcus's assistance, bronze plaque mounted on limestone matching the dam's original construction. The text they'd labored over for months, now permanently attached to the structure it described. Future generations would read those words and understand what had happened here, why it mattered, what it meant. After the ceremony, people dispersed into smaller groups. Tours of the dam led by engineering students. Refreshments provided by local businesses. Children playing near the pond under watchful parental eyes. The casual mingling of community celebration. Marcus found himself standing with Rachel and Emma, watching the valley that had become home again. Or perhaps had always been home and he'd just been too stubborn to recognize it. Think Grandpa would approve? Emma asked. He'd hate the attention. Marcus smiled, but he'd love that people finally understand what he was protecting. Rachel squeezed his hand. He'd approve of you, of who you've become. The 3 of them stood together in afternoon sun, watching water flow over stone that had served its purpose for longer than most human institutions survived. The dam wasn't just infrastructure anymore. It was testament to the idea that some things were built to last, that careful maintenance mattered, that presence counted more than any temporary achievement. That evening, after guests had departed and equipment had been packed away, Marcus walked the property alone. The research station construction would begin in 2 weeks. Emma's grant funded not just her research, but facilities for visiting scholars. The cottage would be surrounded by academic infrastructure within a year. The change felt appropriate. His great-grandfather had built the dam. His grandfather had maintained it. His father had protected it. Marcus had fought for it. Now Emma would teach from it, each generation adding value while preserving core purpose. He found Rachel sitting on the dam wall, watching sunset paint the mountains in amber and gold, the particular quality of light that made everything look like it was glowing from within. "Good day?" she asked as he sat beside her. "Good day," he confirmed. "Strange, but good." "Why strange?" "Because 3 years ago I was in Denver billing hours for projects I can barely remember. Married to my career, estranged from my daughter, avoiding my dying father because facing him meant confronting my own failures. And now I'm sitting on a dam my great-grandfather built, beside a woman I married and divorced, and am somehow building a new relationship with, celebrating a legacy I spent decades running from." Rachel leaned against him. "Life's funny that way. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what actually matters." They sat in comfortable silence, watching day transition to evening. Bats emerged to hunt insects over the pond. The air cooled with that particular speed of mountain altitude. Stars began appearing in deepening blue. Marcus thought about his father's journal entries. Decades of daily observations about water and weather, and the accumulated small details that created understanding. About his great-grandfather building with hand tools and faith that careful work would endure. About Emma carrying forward knowledge that would outlast them all. Some legacies were measured in stone and mortar, others in knowledge passed from generation to generation. The best legacies combined both: physical structures that taught lessons beyond their immediate function, infrastructure that embodied principles worth preserving. Hayes Dam was both. Would continue being both long after Marcus was gone. Would teach students who weren't yet born about engineering and responsibility and the value of maintenance. Would protect families who had no idea they needed protection. That was enough. More than enough. That was everything. "Do you ever wonder what happens next?" Rachel asked. "Kid, after us?" Marcus gestured toward the valley below. "Emma's research station trains the next generation. They learn from this dam and apply those lessons to their own projects. Some of them teach others. The knowledge spreads, multiplies, outlives any individual contribution. So the legacy continues, if we do our part, if we maintain what needs maintaining, if we show up every day whether anyone's watching or not." He turned to look at her directly. That's all any generation can do. Protect what they inherited, improve what they can, pass it forward better than they found it. Rachel smiled. "When did you get so wise?" "When I finally stopped running from the truth. When I learned that my father and grandfather weren't failures for choosing small over big. They were successful in ways I was too blind to recognize." They sat until full darkness arrived and cold drove them inside. The cottage welcomed them with warmth from fires Marcus had banked that morning. Rachel made tea while Marcus added logs. They settled on the couch with the easy comfort of people who'd learned to share space without needing to fill it with performance. Marcus pulled out his father's final journal, the one Tom had been writing in during his last year, open to an entry from 6 months before Tom died. "Read from November." Marcus called Emma today, asked if I was angry that he rarely visits. Told him no. Can't be angry at a man for being afraid. Marcus is terrified of becoming like me, of choosing legacy over ambition, of measuring success by presence instead of prestige. But what he doesn't understand is that I chose this life, and it was enough, more than enough. I hope he learns that before it's too late. I love my son even if I can't find the words to tell him. Marcus's voice caught on the final words. He'd read the entry before, but it hit differently now, after proving himself, after earning forgiveness, after finally understanding what his father had been trying to teach. He found the words, Rachel said quietly, through his actions, through the legacy he left, through everything he built and maintained and protected. Emma called as they were preparing for bed. "Dad, I've been thinking about the research station design. What if we incorporated some of Great-Grandpa's original techniques into the construction? Hand-cut local stone for the foundation, traditional timber framing, modern engineering but historic methods, blending old and new." Exactly. Showing that traditional techniques still work, that there's value in craftsmanship and attention and working with materials the way people did before everything became about speed and cost-cutting. "I love it," Marcus said. "Your great-great-grandfather would approve." After hanging up, he stood at the window looking toward the dam, invisible in darkness, but present in the sound of water flowing. That constant voice that had sustained this valley for a century. that would continue sustaining it for another century if each generation did its part. Rachel came to stand beside him. What are you thinking about? Legacy. Responsibility. The fact that everything I spent 15 years chasing didn't matter as much as the things I was running from. Any regrets? Plenty. But regret becomes useful when it informs future action, when it teaches rather than paralyzes. He turned to face her. I regret the years I wasted, the time I missed with Emma, the fact that my father died alone. But I'm grateful for the chance to do better, to become someone worthy of the legacy I inherited. Rachel kissed him gently. You already are. They went to bed in the cottage that had sheltered 3 generations of Hayes men who'd understood what mattered, fell asleep to the sound of water flowing over stone, woke to dawn light touching peaks that had witnessed a century of patient service. Life settled into rhythms that felt sustainable. Marcus consulted on preservation projects across Colorado. Rachel rebuilt her firm on foundation of integrity. Emma wrote her thesis while designing the research station, the 3 of them sharing meals and conversation, and the comfortable silences of people who'd earned trust through consistent presence. Spring brought construction crews to build Emma's facility, local contractors using techniques that honored the property's history while meeting modern codes. Marcus watched the work progress with satisfaction that didn't require public recognition, the joy of seeing something built properly, of watching skills passed forward. Summer brought the first visiting researchers, graduate students from 3 universities studying how 19th century engineering principles could inform 21st century infrastructure. Emma led tours and workshops, her teaching gift evident in how she made complex concepts accessible. Autumn brought Marcus and Rachel's quiet wedding in the cottage, with only Emma and Bear and Patricia as witnesses. No formal ceremony, no elaborate reception, just 2 people promising to try again, to build something better from the lessons of previous failure, to show up for each other every day whether it was convenient or not. Winter brought the kind of peace that comes from work well done, from responsibilities met, from understanding finally achieved after too many years of confusion. On a January evening, Marcus and Rachel and Emma sat in the workshop reviewing plans for the following year. More research funding, additional academic partnerships, educational programs that would reach high schools across the state. The dam becoming what Tom Hayes had always hoped it would be. Not just infrastructure, but inspiration. Emma closed her laptop and looked at her parents. You know what Grandpa would say if he could see all this? What? Marcus asked. That it's nice, but the dam still needs daily monitoring and the spillway needs inspection before spring melt, and there's always work to do regardless of ceremonies or celebrations. Marcus laughed because it was exactly right. His father would have approved of the recognition, but only as long as it didn't interfere with actual maintenance. Glory was fine, but gates needed greasing, and mortar needed checking, and water needed observing. That's what I'm doing tomorrow, Marcus said. Full inspection, daily logs, all the unglamorous work that actually keeps things functioning. Rachel smiled. The work nobody notices until it's not done. Exactly. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settle comfortably across his shoulders. The burden his father and grandfather had carried, the duty he'd finally learned to embrace, the legacy he'd passed to Emma and her students, and everyone who learned from this dam that some things were worth protecting. They sat together in the workshop that smelled like coffee and old wood, and accumulated years of patient service. Outside, the dam flowed with its century-old voice, water and stone in conversation that would outlast any individual contribution. Some things were built to last, some knowledge passed through generations, some responsibilities transcended single lifetimes. Marcus Hayes had learned what his father spent 60 years trying to teach. That presence mattered more than prestige. That protection was its own reward. That showing up every day for something that mattered was the highest form of success. The dam stood ready for another century of service. The legacy continued. The work went on. And finally, after too many years of running, Marcus Hayes was home.